One that single package in the robot's hand, that is how his personal hell officially began. There was absolutely no warning. Of course, the handsome young guy could have just left. But let's be real, he had zero options, so he chose the lesser evil. He joked to his robotic partner that his old commander was just training him. That was what he told his silent machine partner. While some guys get human partners, he got a robot with glowing scanners for eyes. Perfect for warehouse work, but then the machine spotted an unregistered box. It immediately rolled inside, leaving its human partner completely behind. Just like that, the robot cut off the guy's stories about his past life. But he wasn't offended. He knew Pax was an incredibly efficient, reliable coworker. They would have time to talk later anyway. Sure enough, Pax returned a few minutes later. The machine was fully loaded with a fresh batch of shipping boxes. It was an easy gig for machines that worked without a single complaint. In fact, the entire logistics center only required one human supervisor. Robots silently scurried around the massive hangar, sorting every single package. Everything ran perfectly, yet there were two major things our guy really missed. First on the list was simple, friendly human warmth. These cold iron machines offered none of that. Second, the entire place was freezing. They never heated the hangar, since the robots did not need any warmth. Maybe this place just was not right for him. Only 2 months ago, he finished military service. He was finally demobilized. Back then, the entire world lay wide open before him. All he had to do was choose a path. The young man deeply wanted to see his family. He missed them terribly, but during their next phone call, they dropped a major bomb. They had already packed up and moved to an entirely different city. They left him their apartment, graciously paying the rent 6 months in advance. It was a bizarre transition. Suddenly, he was living entirely on his own. He was completely jobless, though his military savings kept him afloat for a while. But when the search actually started, reality hit hard. Job hunting was brutal. Finding any decent position proved to be an absolute nightmare. He tried getting a part-time gig at a local cafe, but things were not so simple. Apparently, even a waiter needed extensive work experience. He was rejected instantly. They did not even give him a chance. Depressing months of searching dragged on. He started losing his mind, wondering if life even had a point at this rate. He could not even land a basic waiting gig. Luckily, his sisters kept cheering him up. Through their texts, one of them finally suggested applying to a delivery logistics company. Sure, they heavily relied on artificial intelligence, but they still hired humans. He walked into the center without holding much hope of actually securing a spot. But with his back against the wall, he had to take any chance. Now here he is working in a massive, cold logistics center. He is surrounded by mindless machines he can never truly connect with. He can talk to them, but they never reply. Kim Jong-un would have kept dreaming. He would have kept spacing out like that forever if his boss had not yelled. It was his constantly annoyed manager, Shin, calling him back to reality. Shin reported that they were out of canned tuna, but Pax sent a weird notification. The system claimed a few were left, so the manager sent Jong-un to investigate. He headed up to check the very top shelves of the warehouse. The young man deeply detested his boss, a manager who treated him worse than any machine, showing zero human warmth, only barking orders. Keeping his head down, Jong-un stepped inside the deep storage area to search for misplaced boxes of canned tuna. This task was tough because of the massive scale of the facility, but after scaling a high ladder, the young man spotted the missing box tucked away in a completely wrong section. No wonder it was lost. Jong-un was already climbing down with the heavy box in his arms when a sudden sound echoed. The heavy steel door slammed shut. Dropping to the floor, he rushed over to investigate. He yanked on the metal handle with all his strength. It did not budge. Locked tight, he grabbed his phone to dial the manager and demand to be let out. But the call failed. An automated message played saying the number was temporarily disconnected. Frustration bubbled up in his chest, but he tried to keep his cool. Maybe it was just a stupid workplace prank. Surely someone would unlock it very soon. He considered calling the police, but hesitated. He did not want to look like a dramatic coward over a simple mistake. Besides, it was warm enough, not a cold freezer. If he dragged emergency services out here, he would make his manager Shin look terrible. Instead, he sent a quick text to his sister, jokingly telling her that he got trapped. She teased him back, joking that he found a clever way to slack off at work. But then her tone shifted. she texted that she just heard a massive building collapse nearby. Right after that ominous text, his signal died. The connection was completely cut. Dread hit him hard. He was no longer just annoyed about being locked in. He was trapped inside, terrified for his sister, and trust me, things are about to get worse. There was no time to think. The ground beneath his feet began to rumble. A violent earthquake struck. The massive concrete structure groaned and swayed around him. The shaking was so intense that he was thrown to the floor, struggling to crawl. Emergency alarms screamed, bathing the entire room in blood-red light. The deafening screech of the sirens drowned out his own frantic breathing. A distorted automated voice ordered all personnel to evacuate and seek immediate shelter. In a panic, Jong-un threw himself against the exit, pounding on the metal. He screamed for help, begging for anyone outside to hear his desperate cries. It was completely useless, forgetting his pride and any fear of looking foolish. He frantically dialed the emergency services number over and over again. But there was zero signal. The screen displayed only a cold, mocking call failed. Terror took over. Was it a sudden war or some massive, unprecedented disaster? Sitting in the dark, his mind naturally spiraled into the absolute worst scenarios. He was utterly paralyzed by the crushing weight of the unknown. But what happened next changed his life forever. Watch closely. A sudden, heavy knock echoed from the other side of the locked door. But this was no normal knock. Massive dents were forming in the iron plate. Jong-un instinctively reached out to unlock it, but a sudden chill stopped him. A primal survival instinct screamed that making even the slightest sound meant death. He held his breath. Whatever was pounding on the steel door from the outside was definitely not human. The realization sent a cold shiver down his spine. Trapped and helpless, he waited as agonizing hours began to tick by. He now owned a precious box of tuna. Making choices is much easier when fed. With his stomach temporarily satisfied, the young man spent the next 3 days waiting. He slowly realized something terrible had happened outside. Nobody was coming to unlock the door. Maybe a war had broken out, but Jong was absolutely sure of one thing. This locked warehouse had indeed saved his entire life. The deafening alarm finally fell silent, letting him sleep normally. Still, he could not hide forever. His phone battery was hovering near zero. Escaping seemed completely impossible, leaving him to pray the military would arrive to secure the area. He hoped they would unlock the building once order was restored in the city. Above all else, he desperately prayed his family was safe from whatever happened. The silence was a relief, but the endless thoughts of the outside world kept him awake. Then out of nowhere, a strange sound echoed through the darkness. A glowing screen materialized right before his eyes. Wait, is this really happening? The text declared he was chosen and had to test a newly awakened ability. Apparently, he was at level 1 and could preserve any object in space. This strange notification actually brought him relief. He figured he had completely lost his mind, unable to separate reality from delusion. But going completely crazy was honestly not the worst option. After surviving alone for 3 whole days, he fully accepted the delusion and made his choice. He barely had to think about what object he wanted to keep. Since he had nothing of value, he chose the massive PAX order fulfillment center where he worked. He desperately wanted his warehouse workplace to remain completely intact. Instantly, space blurred, and he began falling through nothingness. The warehouse was gone. He had no clue what was happening. As the thick smoke settled, a bright sunny sky finally came into view. But the view brought absolutely no joy to his heart. The entire city was a ruined wasteland. Shattered streets were buried under rubble, the sky burning with a crimson glow. Wrecked cars and lifeless bodies now lay scattered everywhere. His own coworkers lay dead among the broken stones, covered in thick ash and dust. Nobody was left alive. Then the air flickered strangely right before him. A chime rang out, confirming his save was successful. The sheer horror was simply too much. He felt physically sick to his stomach, looking at the corpses and his ruined hometown. Suddenly, his head began to ache with an intense pain. An alert screen flashed, announcing that his saving process was being updated. He crouched on the dirt, struggling desperately to catch his breath. Then a massive shadow fell right over his own, instantly catching his terrified attention. He slowly turned. Brace yourselves, because this is bad. Standing there in all its grotesque and horrific glory was a towering goblin. Drenched in cold sweat, he jammed his hand over his mouth to choke back a scream. Suddenly, he remembered the terrifying roar that shook the warehouse 3 days ago. Then another colossal foot stepped right into his field of vision. It resembled a human foot, but it was massive and covered in blood. This was absolutely no wild animal. He could not restrain his panic. He bolted at full speed, screaming desperately for anyone to save him. The goblin hesitates, but realizing his prey is running, he lets out a wild screech. He roars in fury and charges right after the fleeing human, refusing to lose his trail. Determined to hunt him down, the beast relentlessly pursues the terrified young man. Soon, Jeongeum finally gets a clear look and realizes his pursuer is a goblin. Where did this monster come from, and how is it moving this incredibly fast? With no time to make a plan, he just bolts blindly through the city streets. He screams out for help, knowing deep down that nobody is coming to save him. If this keeps up, he is dead. Then, a sudden system notification flashes. Synchronization is complete. He can now finally enter his dimensional subspace. A glowing screen instantly materializes right in front of him. Jeongeum sprints straight for it, just as the goblin reaches out to grab him by the shoulder. He thinks he is done for, but his head is already crossing into the glowing portal. Squeezing his eyes tightly shut, he prepares himself for a brutal death. Jeongeum stands there trembling, hands over his head, desperately trying to shield himself. But the goblin is gone. Opening his eyes, he realizes he is completely unharmed. He is safe while the massive, terrifying monster is trapped outside. The beast stands on the other side of the portal, blocked as if by glass. Unable to reach him, the beast growls. Still in shock, Jeongeum spots a drone hovering nearby. He asks if the goblin is truly locked out. The drone immediately confirms it. Without his direct permission, absolutely nothing can enter or leave this dimensional subspace. He processes this incredible news, still completely baffled by who is speaking to him. Who is this mysterious voice? Looking around, his jaw drops at his surroundings. He is standing right inside the massive logistics center he worked at. Who wouldn't want an entire warehouse full of endless supplies? He can't believe his eyes. Speechless, he stares at the hovering drone, trying to process this madness. The entire warehouse, complete with all the robots in stock, is inside his subspace. Everything has been successfully stored. Then, another system notification chimes. For entering his pocket dimension for the first time, he receives a unique reward. A single magic stone. This glowing, diamond-shaped rock radiates a surge of pure energy. What he is supposed to do with this magical rock remains a complete mystery. Outside, the furious goblin keeps pounding violently on the invisible entrance barrier. And honestly, you can't blame him. A fresh human meal is hard to come by. Its bloodthirsty, hate-filled gaze and massive fangs drip with drool. With a terrifying growl, the beast snarls. Jeongeum nervously asks the drone again. Can this monster really not break inside? The drone reassures him once more. He is safe. Next, the system displays information about the massive logistics center. It details the entire inventory of goods and the options for shipping them out. He learns a major catch. There are only 2 minutes left before the shutdown. To prevent this, he must use the magic stone to power the entire pocket dimension. This energy keeps the stored items and the logistics center fully active. Right now, Jeongeum has just 1 stone, enough to keep everything running for 24 hours. Drone explains that the logistics facility is entirely fueled by magic stones. It sounds absolutely unreal, but the post-apocalyptic system is fully operational. Even the AI system, PAX, is far smarter now than before the world ended. But before Jeongeum can ask anything else, the drone fleet suddenly takes flight. Off it flew. Within seconds, the entire power grid flickered and died. Blackout, the drone warned that if the power stayed off for long, all of PAX's stored inventory would rot, ruining their delivery system entirely. Their automated systems usually kept things perfectly chilled, but the world outside was a brutal war zone right now. Surviving out there meant keeping this massive warehouse completely safe. If the power to these massive refrigerators died, all this food was doomed. That meant keeping this entire logistics hub online was their absolute first priority. And get this, the entire place was running on just 1 magic stone. It would only last 24 hours. Where would Jiang find another? The only way to get them was hunting the monsters roaming outside. Those terrifying beasts from another world now completely ruled the ruined city streets. Goblins and worse, Jiang knew exactly what he was up against. He handed his last stone to the robot to buy some time. Then the young man turned to Pax to help him find gear. He desperately needed real weapons, specifically a box of heavy axes and blades. Sifting through the knives and cleavers, he eventually grabbed a standard camping axe. It felt solid enough, but getting close to those beasts was suicide. To keep his distance, he would have to throw knives instead. But his knife supply was pretty low. Throwing them wildly would leave him empty-handed. Besides, would a throwing knife even pierce the thick hide of an orc? Probably not, so Jiang gripped his camping axe and prepared to test it. The goblin was waiting for him, right outside the exit of his safe subspace. Jiang knew he did not need a clean kill on his first try. A crippling wound would be enough to give him the upper hand. He just needed to land one deep, painful cut to test the waters. Remembering his training in the special forces, Jiang threw the axe with force. The brute roared in anger, but it did not even budge from its spot. Jiang gritted his teeth. His human strength was useless against it. But then another axe nearby glowed softly, as if calling to him. With zero other options left, he had to take what he could get. He hoped to scavenge a few more identical weapons from the warehouse. While Pax pulled up the data, Jiang kept planning his assault. He needed to pelt the brute with heavy weapons to pierce it. Pax quickly confirmed that they only had 15 of these camping axes in the warehouse. That was a pretty tight budget for a long fight. He asked the robot where they were kept and hurried over to gather his arsenal. But the very moment his hand gripped the handle of the weapon, something totally unexpected happened. Turns out every physical item in this subspace was converted to pure data. That meant every single physical item could easily be copied over and over again. Even if they broke or got lost, they would absolutely never run out. Talk about a massive upgrade. This entire logistics center was an infinite supply hub. He never had to worry about running out of gear. Rationing was completely out the window. He could now throw as many weapons as he wanted without a single worry. He was left empty-handed, and things were only going to get tougher. The orc's raw physical strength was massive. Thankfully, Pax explained that physical combat was completely unnecessary since Jiang could instantly teleport the orcs. Straight out of his subspace, he could only do this once every 30 seconds. With practice, his skill would level up and drop that cooldown. Even further, all Jiang had to do was visualize an item and command a delivery, and boom, instant shipment. It was a totally unique power that Jiang could keep upgrading. During future missions, he immediately decided to test it on a goblin. It worked flawlessly. In seconds, the massive beast's body slumped dead in the street. His current delivery speed was clocked at 60 kilometers per hour. Pax noted that he could easily upgrade this. To boost his delivery speed limit, Jiang had to level up his unique skill that required magic stones, which he could harvest directly from the slain monster corpses. A solid plan was finally coming together. Began taking shape inside Jiang's mind to gather those precious magic stones. He just had to hunt down more monsters. He only needed a few prep items first. Jiang shed his dusty warehouse uniform and asked Pax for a gear upgrade. To navigate the ruined city streets without any trouble, he chose sturdy combat boots to protect his feet and keep his movement unrestricted. Next, he requested heavy tactical pants packed with utility pockets, built-in knee pads, and water resistance. He also needed a detailed map of Seoul along with a pack of bright markers. Once he changed into his fresh gear and laid out the city map, he got straight to work. Jiang circled his target destinations, planning out a search route to find his family members. Safety first, he mapped out the most logical path. That he had to move fast if he wanted to protect them from harm. Traveling on foot across a ruined landscape was simply out of the question, especially with the broken roads and bloodthirsty monsters wandering everywhere. So finding a mountain bike in the warehouse stash was a massive win. Sure, a car or motorcycle would be faster, but in this apocalypse, even a basic bike was a godsend, especially since this ride came fully equipped with an electric motor and a bright headlight. Jiang set off toward the city, praying his family could hang on just a bit longer. Within 30 minutes of stepping back outside his safe subspace, he had already taken down 12 orcs. Fighting through them made him realize two critical things: goblins and beasts always strike with mindless aggression. Fortunately, Jiang's incredible delivery skill kicked in to push them back. He even hid in his subspace. Whenever the waves of enemies became too overwhelming, the monsters were left furious. dripping drool and pure hatred because they couldn't touch him. He didn't have time for deep research, but Jiang definitely grasped. The core mechanics, his shipping power was basically a cheat code. He could easily wound enemies by flinging his camping axe from a distance, keeping himself perfectly safe. Still, his terrible aim meant he needed some serious practice. The 30-second reload was a massive drag, but his overall combat performance kept improving with every magic stone he fed it. Plus, Pax had plenty of tricks beyond basic delivery. He literally launched a camping axe using his skill right into an orc's head. Then, with the return function, he instantly snatched the weapon back. Talk about a handy feature, normal gear-like. That axe did not really need retrieving, but he found a much cooler application, using this trick to yank magic stones right out of dead goblin bodies. It was seriously satisfying. Too bad those precious stones only dropped after the target actually died. Honestly, he had no idea how the return command worked on things he never even sent out in the first place, like those internal magic stones. Still, pulling them out after death was a massive win, and it was honestly brilliant of him to store packs inside his subspace. With this safe zone active, survival was guaranteed. He just had to get his entire family inside as fast as humanly possible. Yet, another pressing issue had recently become crystal clear to Jiangyon. These hostile, otherworldly threats, tearing through human logic, went way beyond basic ground pests like the mere goblins and orcs. Massive flying beasts like dragons which swallowed whole packs like flies were incredibly lethal. He knew that hunting an aerial apex predator would be brutal given its insane speed and scale. Or maybe his own mind was just playing cruel tricks on him, fueled by the blood-curdling shrieks echoing from every corner of this dark city. It was terrifying. Suddenly, a desperate, raw human scream reached Chinjayam's ears, pleading desperately for help. Seconds later, a panicked survivor scrambled directly toward him. The guy was still alive but completely terrified, chased by a massive winged dragon that was closing the gap fast. The beast flared its massive tail and whipped the poor guy right in the spine, sending him crashing down. Right then, another survivor rushed out to drag his fallen buddy to safety. But focused on the rescue, he completely missed the shadow looming overhead. The dragon's massive maw, lined with razor-sharp fangs, yawned open right above him, ready to snap his neck like a dry twig. Death was staring him right in his face. He froze, trapped before the beast. He could not even move, paralyzed with raw terror. Then the winged beast abruptly pivoted right before his face, soaring back up. Rescuer stood there utterly dazed, wondering why he had just been spared. Then it hit him. The monster was purely focused on his friend, named Choi. Honestly, it made zero sense because Choi was basically skin and bones. How was he supposed to rescue his buddy from being torn apart by a literal dragon? The flimsy blade in his grip was shaking violently. What could a pocket knife even do against a gargantuan dragon? But wait, what is that familiar sound? A bicycle bell rings out. A blinding headlight suddenly pierces the dark, completely obscuring the mysterious rider. But in the very next second, everything completely shifts. An invisible shockwave blasted directly toward the dragon, leaving it mortally wounded. The blood-drenched survivor watched the scene unfold with wide eyes, realizing he was saved as the wounded dragon spiraled to the side. The beast collapses into the dirt, stiffening as it dies. The survivors stare in shock. They can see their dead enemy clearly, noticing something strange lodged in its skull. Slowly creeping closer, they notice the massive beast's throat has been completely torn open. Someone actually sliced the dragon open with a basic camping axe right in front of them. It makes absolutely no sense. How could anyone pull off a stunt like that? Right then, a lone cyclist rolls out of the dark, looking pretty relieved. He asks if they are all right, shielding the bright beam of his flashlight. He carefully covers the lens so he does not blind them in the pitch black. The survivors blink, suddenly staring at a young kid sitting on a simple bicycle. He looks incredibly young, his face full of genuine, innocent worry. The men just gawk. Their jaws drop. This makes absolutely zero sense. A random kid on a bike just destroyed a massive monster with a tiny axe. He is definitely not military. If a highly trained squad did this, they would understand. But a schoolboy, meanwhile, the young rider realizes he has left them completely speechless. He scratches his head, feeling a bit awkward under their intense, disbelieving stares. Finally snapping out of it, the group immediately showers the kid with grateful praise. They bow deeply, thanking him over and over for saving their lives. The boy quickly bows back, politely explaining that he is just glad everyone is safe. He mentions he is actually just a delivery guy for the pack's logistics company. That completely throws them off. They assumed he was some elite soldier in disguise. Normal delivery guys do not just slaughter giant dragons. One of the men admits he also awakened a special class of his own. It is a driving skill, which is totally useless in this broken, ruined world. He has not touched a steering wheel since the world ended, the other guy. He has zero special powers, relying entirely on pure luck to stay alive. They explain that a massive crowd initially fled to this industrial warehouse district. Sadly, the local monsters also had the exact same idea. The majority of the refugees were slaughtered almost immediately upon arrival. Ruthless orcs hunted them down, leaving barely 10 to 15 survivors left alive. Now they are hiding deep inside the subway terminal. These guys were scouting for safe roads to drive on. They also desperately needed to scavenge food, but the logistics center is gone. The massive building literally vanished. Talk about a total mystery. Either way, standing around in the open is a terrible idea right now. If the kid has no safe spot, he is welcome to join them. Their base is down on the 4th basement level, completely free of monsters. They can sleep soundly, and they even offer to share their food. Jinjayam hesitates, wondering if tagging along with strangers is actually smart. He does not need their supplies, but their talk of working cars sparks his interest. Plus, gathering intel is always a good idea in a chaotic apocalypse. He smiles and politely accepts, thanking them for the generous offer. It is pretty bold of them to invite an armed stranger back home. With the deal struck, the newly formed group quietly moves out together. Quickly activating his special delivery skill, a glowing magic stone shoots up. He slips the precious drop straight into his pocket dimension, totally unnoticed. Luckily, his new companions had no idea what he could do. If things went south, he could escape into his subspace in an instant. Nearby, the massive body of an orc lay in a pool of blood with a spear in its neck. An exhausted warrior stood over the slain beast, looking completely worn out from the fight. Spotting the newly arrived group, he immediately turned and demanded answers. He demanded his identity, his entire posture radiating pure hostility. Realizing how dangerous this fighter looked, Jeongjeom knew he had to tread carefully. After all, this brute had just single-handedly taken down a massive orc. The beast had wandered into their camp by mistake and never noticed the humans. This made it easy for them to kill the creature and escape without a scratch. But their safety was shattered, as more monsters could easily swarm the area tomorrow. Next time they might not be so lucky. Jeongjeom stared at the corpse in horror. He remembered how the group had promised him this area was totally safe. Clearly they were wrong. Suddenly, all eyes in the camp snapped right back to him. The survivors demanded answers, but then the local escorts quickly stepped in to explain. He had saved them from a wyvern. He was a former employee at PAX Logistics and possessed unbelievable physical strength. He had killed the beast with an axe. The impact was so devastating that the monster's head was completely obliterated. The crowd froze in shock, staring at him in disbelief. Suddenly, a short woman with a remarkably kind face stepped up and grabbed his hand. She tearfully thanked the young man for saving Yunsu and Benchal. Soon, other survivors gathered around to express their deep gratitude as well. All this sudden praise made Jeongjeom feel incredibly embarrassed and awkward. He tried to explain that he only did what anyone else would have done. But their heartfelt praise kept coming, as these people had worked side by side for over 10 years. Over that decade, they had basically become like family. Hearing the emotional commotion, the general manager of the terminal stepped up to him. His name was Lee Junmok, and he bowed deeply in gratitude. He formally thanked the young hero for saving Yunsu and Benchal from danger. Once the introductions ended, they guided him down below. They led Jeongjeom through the underground shelters, showing him how they managed to survive. Life down here was actually much better than on the surface. They had food and fresh water gathered from the logistics warehouse. There was even a safe place to sleep, while an armed guard stayed on duty. The manager was sure their food supply would last a long time. But their sense of security vanished when a scouting party returned from the ruined city. They reported that the massive logistics center had completely vanished. Everyone fell into a state of shock, unable to believe the grim news. The sudden realization hit them that their endless food supply was officially gone forever. Lee Junmok was completely stunned, but Yunsu verified the terrible report. He added that while searching the area, they ran directly into a wyvern. No one understood how a massive concrete warehouse could just vanish into thin air. But with monsters roaming the ruins, they had to accept this cruel reality. With their main food source gone, they desperately needed to find a new path. Under these insane circumstances, the manager announced they had to clear the tunnel at all costs. Staying put would only make things worse. Every single day, still, despair was totally useless. This moment simply came a bit earlier than expected, but leaving was inevitable anyway. The most important thing was having a solid plan. Jeongjam listened closely to their chatter before turning to the manager to ask about the tunnel. Exactly which one were they talking about? The manager explained that before the world ended, everyone lived far apart. They all needed vehicles for work, so transport was not an issue. The real problem was the blocked roads. For starters, the northern path was cut off by a golf course, while the east was buried in containers. Even the southern highway was completely destroyed. That left only the western tunnel as their sole escape, but a pack of wyverns nested inside. Until now, they survived off logistics center food, but that ride was over. They had to force their way through. The manager pulled Jeongjam aside and whispered that he really didn't have to join this suicide mission. The blockades only stopped large vehicles, meaning his bicycle could easily slip past. But Jeongjam shook his head. He needed proper wheels to find his family. Besides, searching for his family meant he needed to help clear the way first. He promised to do whatever it took to break through that tunnel. But deep down, he kept his guard up. Why? Because he didn't trust them. He refused to show off his abilities to people he barely knew. After all, they might not actually be as friendly as they seemed. They had not been safe and snug in a warehouse like Jeongjam. They fought tooth and nail for survival while he sat locked away. They possessed valuable food and water from the local logistics hub. And obviously, they were not going to share those resources easily with strangers. Which was actually pretty smart, so Jeongjam decided to scope out the tunnel. He wanted to see exactly how many nasty creatures had bred inside. Telling his new companions his plan, he hoped to clear it solo. This was the perfect chance to upgrade the skills he unlocked earlier. Defeating the orc opened new paths, and now he wanted more. Those magic stones could easily reduce his skill cooldown times. He could already ship 2 items at once with his delivery skill. A strange auto-delivery function also existed, but he would test that later. He only needed 10 magic stones to make this massive upgrade happen. Hunting a pack of wyverns was the fastest way to get them. So he planned to slip away quietly, slay the beasts, and evolve. But Yunsu suddenly volunteered to join him on this crazy scout mission. The guy had been chased by a massive wyvern earlier and knew their movements. Plus, Jeongjam did not know the way, and Yunsu deeply trusted him. He felt entirely safe as long as they stuck together. This detour messed with Jeongjam's solo plans, but he did not argue. Besides, Yunsu was eager to test out his own driving skill. He never got a system prompt, but he felt it in his bones. He memorized how to run the vehicle, but it did not help. It did not convince Jeongjam, who knew this was going to be their very first ride. The duo climbed out of the dark underground and stepped onto the city streets. Yunsu hopped onto the bike, fully prepared to speed them straight toward the tunnel. His driving ability was absolutely insane as they tore down the road. Wind whipped violently past their ears without letting up, completely terrifying Jeongjam. He believed driving this fast was completely suicidal, with so many abandoned cars blocking the path. These wrecks were incredibly hard to spot, but Yunsu completely ignored his panic screams. All Jeongjam could do was grip the seat with white knuckles and pray they actually survived. Jeongjam sat frozen on the speeding bike with his head tucked in panic. He kept his eyes squeezed shut, bracing for the absolute worst, when suddenly everything changed. Yunsu yelled out some terrible news. A massive wyvern was lurking right ahead. The driver had no idea if he should plow right through or try to swerve. But the beast already spotted them, locking its bloodthirsty gaze onto the incoming prey. Yunsu glanced back at his terrified passenger, desperately trying to figure out their next move. He did not slow down a single fraction of a second, driving Jeongjam mad. Terrified and desperate, Jeongjam instantly activated his special skill while they flew down the road. A heavy camping axe materialized on the fly, smashing right into the monster's jaw. They shot past the dying beast as Yunsu somehow managed to steer with his foot. He even stole a quick glance at the falling creature before they zipped away. Leaving the dead wyvern behind, Jeongjam quickly executed his special delivery skill. After warning the driver not to look back, he snatched the magic crystal. He pulled the glowing stone right out of the beast. Seconds later, they arrived. The tunnel was finally in sight, reached in mere minutes thanks to Yunsu's insane driving. But without warning, he slammed on the brakes and brought them to a stop. And trust me, nobody could have predicted the absolute horror they just stumbled into. Massive wyverns surrounded them on every single side, leaving them absolutely no room to escape. Jeongjam stared calmly at the beasts, while Yunsu prepared to say his final goodbyes. He realized that even a fast electric bike could not outrun a pack of dragons. There was simply no way out of this trap, and they were completely cornered. The monsters drooled in anticipation, ready to tear their flesh apart for a quick dinner. Yunsu could only pray his companion had one last trick up his sleeve. If not, they were doomed. Yunsu was shaking, drenched in cold sweat. Jeongjam swore under his breath, realizing he could no longer keep his massive power hidden. He opened the app, fully aware that his partner would see everything now. Spending his last 5 magic stones, he instantly reset the incredibly long cooldown timer. Just in time as the lead dragon lunged forward to snap them in half. Huge jaws snapped shut, but the rest of the pack closed in on them simultaneously. It was a coordinated strike, with absolutely zero blind spots left for escape. Yunsu gripped the bike handles, staring directly into the terrifying abyss of a massive throat. The terrifying mouth loomed closer, ready to swallow him whole in one bite. Right before the giant teeth clamped down on his skull, his crazy delivery skill activated. Delivery power flashed, and every single dragon instantly vanished into thin air. Jeongjam turned to his deeply shaken partner and firmly assured him that they were safe. The danger had passed, but he still had a massive explanation to give. His new ally about the pocket subspace he controlled, and his method to massacre these beasts. Turns out, he actually boosts his stats using magic stones. And to cut down his skill cooldowns, he just needs to level up his dimensional pocket itself. Easiest way, just hunt down huge dragons. Beasts using a quick harvest spell, the hunter extracts glowing magic stones from the dead beasts. Keep close, Jeongjam warns his friend. He tells him to keep his cheap camping axe ready because things are about to get ugly. Yunsu has a million questions about the warehouse, the inventory, and the insane powers this guy has, but honestly, none of that matters right now. Important, a massive flying dragon swoops in, aiming for his head. No time for questions, Jeongjam hurls his camping axe instantly, straight into the creature's throat, ending it in a single strike. With one beast down, he instantly turns on the next. Meanwhile, Yunsu just stands there, completely paralyzed with fear. Honestly, he is too exhausted to even scream anymore. As massive fangs snap inches from his face, suddenly Yunsu gets knocked to the dirt by a heavy sweeping tail. But hey, a little dirt is a pretty small price to pay for survival. Fortunately, Jeongjam is right there to cover him. Axe in hand, the protector is ready to take down the beast. At a moment's notice, he hurls his axe at the incoming beast, but wait. This dragon is way too fast. Jeongjam cannot land a clean, lethal blow. Fatal blow, instead he vanishes into his subspace, terrifying Yunsu. With his defender gone, the cyclist is completely defenseless against those giant jaws. But Jeongjam is not panicking. From inside his private zone, he aims and throws another weapon, teleporting it right out of thin air toward the dragon. Blood sprays, the dragon drops dead. Yunsu is totally blown away. Yunsu is speechless. He genuinely does not know who to fear more, these flying monsters or his terrifyingly overpowered savior. His brain is completely fried. Like, how does a guy from a basic warehouse job fight like this? His sheer mastery with a simple camping axe is honestly off the charts. One thing is certain, these monsters are no match for Jeongjam. He clears tunnels effortlessly, no sweat, and with some real wheels. If they can find a working car, they have a real shot at escaping this nightmare safely, especially with Yunsu's top-tier driving skills. The tunnel is just the beginning. There will definitely be more beasts waiting outside on the roads, but Yunsu is not that worried anymore. Why? Because once he gets behind a wheel, he is in his element. Still, he cannot help but feel a bit jealous of Jeongjam's insane powers. With a cheat code like that, Yun-Soo could find his family in no time. But Jeongjam needs wheels too. He has a very long journey ahead of him. Suddenly, one of the flying beasts retreats, realizing this human is too deadly. Turns out these scaly monsters actually have some survival instincts. Jeongjam wants to test his subspace targeting, but he is running low on materials. He needs those core stones from the monsters. Yun-Soo stares at the crystal, having absolutely no clue what it does or why it is so valuable. Jeongjam explains that these glowing rocks are what upgrade his overpowered skills. These magic stones could boost power and fortify a player's personal subspace, but Yun-Soo had never used them to upgrade his abilities simply because he never knew they existed. He admired Jeongjam's incredible axe-throwing skill, launching them with the explosive force of a gun. That sheer power was how he killed the beasts. Jeongjam admitted that he wasn't sure if he had completely cleared the tunnel during his scout. He preferred to keep his terrifying abilities hidden from others. Still, Yun-Soo apologized for ruining his plans, but the young man told him not to worry. Without Yun-Soo guiding him, he would have been completely lost. Jeongjam then suggested heading back down into the underground shelter, because the dragons had retreated for now, but could strike again anytime. After that, Yun-Soo asked a personal question: how far was Jeongjam planning to travel if he needed a vehicle this badly? The young man replied that he was heading to his family in Gangnam, then finally Yeongjungpo. Yun-Soo admitted that his own destination was Indiagwan, which was right on the way. Teaming up was honestly the perfect option for both of them. Yun-Soo knew he wouldn't survive the journey home alone, even after passing through the tunnel. His active skill was strictly driving. He was phenomenal behind the wheel, but he was absolutely no fighter. Jeongjam, however, knew how to slaughter monsters. Since they shared a path, why not join forces? Gangnam was far, but Yun-Soo promised to get him there incredibly fast. He knew he was just a driver, but he swore he wouldn't be a burden to Jeongjam. Plus, he had some food supplies they could share. The plan made total sense, especially since Yun-Soo's driving skills were top tier. Still, Jeongjam was desperate to hide his abilities from other players, fearing how they might react if they ever learned the truth. They could try to force him into dangerous tasks against his will, like withholding the car keys, until he did exactly what they demanded. But he wanted to trust Yun-Soo, who had risked his life to help him escape that terrifying monster, so the young man accepted the offer, agreeing to team up and drive toward his family's place together. But there was one catch: he had to clear the tunnel entirely alone. Nobody could interfere or witness his real power. Jeongjam strictly requested that they let him handle the clearing by himself. Yun-Soo placed his hand on his heart, swearing the other survivors wouldn't be stubborn or get in his way. Once they returned to the underground shelter, Yun-Soo gathered all the survivors to announce a massive breakthrough for their escape. Jeongjam was going to clear the tunnel using his newly awakened ability, meaning everyone just had to wait outside until he finished. He added that he couldn't explain the power because it was a secret. Everyone just had to trust Jeongjam blindly, but honestly, this was pretty reckless. He had literally exposed someone else's secret. The crowd was completely stunned by the wild news, struggling to process what they were hearing. Their new companion was going to clear the dangerous path alone while they sat back. Yun-Soo even promised to tell them exactly how the young man did it. The entire situation was falling apart right before their eyes. Any remaining trust they had was starting to completely slip away. The manager stared at the young man, looking completely puzzled and lost. What to do, he had no clue. Yum knew there was no backing down. So he made his announcement: the tunnel would be cleared by tomorrow morning. A bold promise: everyone would be able to pass through safely. It sounded totally impossible, but these people had no other options left. Food supplies were running extremely low, and the tunnel was their only hope. Manager Chin Mok decided not to ask questions about the boy's actual abilities. Clear the path, that is all that mattered. Maybe Yum acted out of kindness. If he worked better completely on his own, they wouldn't get in his way. But the manager still insisted Yum accept the food and water they had. He would need all his strength to face whatever lay in that dark tunnel. Since the kid was risking his life, this was the absolute least they could do. Food was scarce. Sharing what little they had supported his solo run. Deeply moved, the survivors began to bow to him in heartfelt gratitude. They felt terrible, simple thanks was all they could offer him. Yum tried to explain that this fight actually benefited him, but they wouldn't listen. He begged them to keep the food for their own families instead. Still, the crowd insisted with pure kindness, asking him to take the offering. Refusing their small gift would only hurt their pride at this point. Besides, he must have a family waiting for him out there somewhere. He could bring these extra rations back to them once they got through this whole mess. Hearing about family brought images of his parents and siblings right before Yum's eyes. Hope was back. The entire group decided it was time to celebrate. They were going to escape this dark underground, so they opened up their secret stash. Inside was a hidden supply of beer, which instantly lifted everyone's spirits. People started drinking, cheering for a future where they could see their loved ones. Everyone prayed that their dreams of a safe reunion would actually come true. There wasn't a lot of alcohol, but there was enough to make some toasts. They drank to a safe reunion with their families and a bright future. A toast to Jong Yum. The next morning brought absolutely beautiful weather. Clear skies, gentle sunlight broke through the soft, peaceful clouds. Right outside the dark tunnel, Yum sat quietly on his bicycle. He gripped a simple camping axe. Honestly, this is going to be wild. Their anxious faces showed how much they feared for his survival. But Yum gave them a confident smile, telling them not to worry at all. Leaving the group behind, he started pedaling toward the dark, gaping entrance. He was ready to clear the path and push his growing skills to the limit. No fear, none at all. His eyes showed only pure determination. He rode forward, focused entirely on getting this massive job done right. Stopping his bike inside the tunnel, he looked up to assess the threat. Wyverns covered the ceiling, swarming, hungry, and waiting to strike. Seeing them brought back childhood memories of when he used to get beaten up. A brutal blow, it had left his eye swollen completely shut. His older sister was his constant and relentless tormentor. She constantly denied every single accusation they threw her way. Endless bickering, it constantly drove their poor father absolutely crazy. Every single argument they had inevitably became a full-blown physical brawl. Despite the bruises and hair pulling, they loved each other deeply. It is true they might even claim to hate each other right now. But eventually, they will both realize that family is actually everything. Their dad would have lectured them forever if Mom had not intervened. She wanted him to help around the house instead of talking. Last night, everyone relaxed with some drinks, and nostalgia hit hard. Everyone started reminiscing about home, and the manager even started crying. He missed his kids, and soon everyone fell into a deep sleep. Loud snoring echoed all through the dark dungeon. Sleeping in that racket was impossible, and some grew incredibly thirsty. Late at night, young Soo got up for his guard duty. Suddenly, trouble, he noticed. Jong Yum was completely gone. Hearing he went out for air, young Soo immediately went looking. He quickly spotted his new friend, standing right near some massive transport trucks. Tomorrow, a brutal battle was waiting for them in the tunnel. Maybe sleeping underground was just too uncomfortable for him. But Jong Yum was actually busy preparing a massive surprise. He was gathering helpful items for everyone living underground. He only partially loaded vehicles to keep them highly maneuverable. That kept the driving easy, and the food supplies were still plenty. This was actually the last of 15 trucks he had already packed. Jong Yum quietly asked him to keep this secret for now. Young Soo was completely baffled by the young man's sudden generosity. Seriously, who on earth has this much wealth to throw around? Meanwhile, the dangerous work of exterminating the dragons pressed forward. Jong Yum easily slaughtered flying wyverns using his delivery skill. It took zero effort. He wished he could protect everyone inside his subspace. But right now, his current strength just was not ready. Upgrading his pocket space by a few levels would easily fix that. That would allow him to harbor up to 20 people safely inside. Stones, he needed far more magic stones to make it happen. Sadly, the remaining dragons in the tunnel were pretty scarce. Most monsters were already scattering in small pairs, making a major upgrade highly unlikely. But his newly boosted precision delivery was working absolute wonders. He easily wiped out dozens of those pesky scaly beasts. Without that critical and timely upgrade, absolutely nothing would have worked. If he wanted to settle his family, he needed massive, legendary beasts. Speak of the devil, a massive creature locked eyes with him. Outside, the anxious crowd waited by the vehicles, holding their breath. Some trusted his power, while others feared the absolute worst. Don't do it, interfering now would only ruin everything. So they decided not to interfere and just waited. Soon enough, Jong Yum emerged from the dark tunnel, his shirt completely splattered with blood and his face covered in gray ash, yet walking closer, he radiated absolute intense satisfaction with his hard work, the morning sun highlighting his surprisingly gentle smile. Instantly, the crowd rushed over, cheering for the young hero, who didn't just survive the tunnel, but saved every last one of them. Soon, the manager gave a heartfelt speech of thanks to his workers and wished them all a safe trip back home. They warmly thanked the manager right back, wishing him safety as they parted ways. Then, Yum told everyone that if they faced any trouble on the road, they should check the cargo hold. They would find something very helpful inside. With that, everyone scrambled into their vehicles, eager to reach their loved ones. The highway was a mess, littered with abandoned cars. But the convoy of trucks steadily pushed forward through the wreckage. Once they cleared the tunnel, they bid farewell and split up. Heading off to their respective families, Jong Yum enjoyed the drive, but his mind kept wandering back to that final dragon he missed. That massive beast vanished too fast for him to study it properly. He was pretty sure it was a wyvern, but something was off. It was far too enormous, maybe even some kind of boss leader. Or perhaps it was just a fully grown version, spawning those smaller dragons. Yum kept analyzing this as he drove. Suddenly, a strange noise caught his attention. He stopped the car right in the middle of downtown, and the silence was incredibly eerie. Corpses of fallen soldiers lay scattered alongside their weapons. It was painfully obvious that the monsters completely outmatched the entire national army. The chilling sight forced a terrible realization: they were utterly defenseless. Rotting carcasses, wrecked cars, and bodies littered the entire area. Every single street was ruined. No matter where they looked, horror followed. Seeing those abandoned military bodies made the situation feel even more hopeless. If the army could not even recover their dead, humanity was doomed. Staring at them, Jong Yum realized that if he had remained in the military, he probably would have ended up just like these torn-apart soldiers left on the asphalt. Up ahead, their path was completely blocked by a massive barbed wire barrier. It was a serious blockade. Clearly, there was no driving through it. But while it could stop humans, it was totally useless against monsters. Flying wyverns and massive orcs would just stomp right through this. The soldiers must have set this up in a desperate panic. They were trying to wall something off. Perhaps they should find another bridge. His friend wanted to run, but would you turn back here? At the far end of the bridge, some massive shapes were moving. Giant, wolf-like creatures. He instantly knew killing them would boost his power. It was the perfect opportunity to upgrade his pocket subspace. Meanwhile, Yunsu was sweating bullets and ready to reverse the car, but right then, a wild plan formed in Jong Yum's mind. He had to cross. Jiom eyes a tight spot and asks the driver if they can squeeze the truck onto the sidewalk. Sure, it is narrow, but they still have a shot. Wearing a confident grin, Jiom trusts his own insane physical power. He proudly declares he has a way to break through. He tells the driver to keep going and absolutely not to turn around. They are going to force their way forward right here. But as they talk strategy, wait, looks like some uninvited guests are heading their way. A massive orc is tearing wolf-like monsters completely to shreds. Within moments, though, the brutal fight takes a pretty shocking turn. A pack of wolves devours the massive orc in just a few seconds. They rip into each other, shredding flesh and spraying blood everywhere. The guys watch with their mouths open, stunned by the sheer brutality. A worried Yunsu asks again if they really have to cross this bridge. Jiom just laughs, mentioning a strategy computer game he loved as a kid. It featured 3 different races, constantly at war with one another. You could customize the map and adjust the settings however you wanted. His absolute favorite setup was defending against endless monsters with very few resources. And right now, they are in that exact spot. The driver swings the truck around, aiming the heavy rear end right at the fence. He slams backward, the wire fence completely shatters. The crash is loud, the hungry beasts immediately look up. They are just finishing their meal of that incredibly unlucky orc. Jiom has been waiting to test out his latest upgrade for a while, though he never expected the perfect chance to arrive this quickly. He orders Tax to dump all their remaining magic stones into truck upgrades. Instantly, his delivery speed shoots up and automatic mode kicks in. This lets him wipe out multiple targets at the exact same time. He is ready, the savage pack is rushing right at him. They want blood. Jeom has a pretty wild defense plan. He starts throwing giant refrigerators, swatting the beasts right out of the air. 12 magic stones, just like that, they are all his. Upgrading his delivery range and accuracy back in the tunnel is seriously paying off. He could have used an axe, but the auto-aim would only adjust slightly. Besides, these wolf-like beasts are incredibly fast on their feet. They would easily dodge a thrown axe at the sheer speeds they are running. They also show absolutely zero fear, ignoring the sudden deaths of their packmates. Considering the chaotic situation, throwing massive appliances is definitely his best move. Dodging is impossible, the fridge is just too massive. They are simply too wide to dodge, taking out several targets at once. And they pack a serious amount of crushing weight. The heavy appliances flatten the beasts completely under their massive weight. It is all thanks to his newly upgraded automatic delivery system. Killing monsters has never been this ridiculously easy or hands-off. The fast beasts cannot even get close before getting wiped out in midair. Those flying fridges spare absolutely no one, leaving Yunsu totally speechless. Yunsu sat locked inside the truck cab, watching the wild battle unfold in the rearview mirror. Giant monsters and heavy refrigerators flew through the air. Honestly, the whole sight was enough to drive anyone crazy. Honestly, flying refrigerators, that was insane. At the same time, Yunsu knew there was no way that many refrigerators could fit inside the truck. Where did they even come from? What was going on? Maybe they were somehow duplicating. Of course, Jeom collected axes from fallen monsters, but where did the refrigerators come from? It made zero sense. Yunsu had his head absolutely spinning. As Jeom casually offered him a snack, suddenly the driver finally realized. The young adventurer had endless supplies, a realization that completely blew his mind. He originally assumed Jeom collected those axes because they were incredibly rare, but it turned out Jeom had a massive stockpile. He said he collected them simply so they would not clutter the road and hurt innocent people. Maybe Yunsu was just overthinking things. Still, the young man never once denied that his supplies were totally limitless. So they happily agreed to have a snack while those refrigerators continued wrecking monsters. Yunsu admitted he still had no idea what kind of abilities Jeom possessed, but honestly, it didn't even matter anymore. His powers got the job done. Yunsu expressed how deeply grateful he was to Jeom for clearing the blocked tunnel and helping him reach the city. Once they crossed the bridge, they would reach his home in an hour. Yunsu prayed that his family was safe and desperately believed they were all right. To distract the driver from those painful thoughts, Jeom pointed out that Yunsu could not show up looking so messy, since it would take some time to clear out the wolf monsters. They had time to find some clothes. At first, Yunsu felt pretty embarrassed and deeply surprised by the offer. Still, Jeom did not have to beg him for very long at all. And the driver quickly voiced his preferences. Now, behind the wheel sat a seriously cool guy wearing slick aviator sunglasses and a highly stylish jacket that looked exactly like the classic pilot uniform from Top Gun. Getting his new outfit, the driver felt like a real fighter pilot. He declared that since most problems were resolved, they should get moving. Jeom watched him with deep apprehension, immediately realizing exactly where this reckless energy was heading. But it was already too late. The truck instantly surged forward at breakneck speed, racing across the bridge and crushing every single surviving monster. Without slowing down for a single second, it flew by so incredibly fast that the terrified creatures were left eating dust far behind. Within less than 30 minutes, they arrived at their destination just before Jeom completely passed out from severe motion sickness, but what they saw there was deeply tragic. Ruined houses, debris-strewn streets, and shattered windows painted a ghostly picture. Not a single living soul was in sight. Though the buildings were completely trashed, there were absolutely no bodies. This lack of casualties gave Yunsu desperate hope that his family was still alive. But as he reached out to open the door, pure terror gripped him. The truth behind that door completely paralyzed him. Perhaps it was better this way. Living in pure ignorance felt safer than confirming his family was dead. Jeom sensed his agony. He quietly stepped in to offer some support. He knew Yun-soo wanted his family back, but fear had him frozen. Finding bodies inside was too much, so Jeom took the lead. He placed a hand on the driver's shoulder, which was absolutely slick with cold sweat. Jeom asked to ring the bell himself, sparing Yun-soo the pain. Nobody wants to be the one to confirm the worst, even with hope left. Honestly, who would actually want to open that terrifying door themselves? Jeom told his friend to brace himself and reached out. Suddenly, everything changed. The door swung open without a sound, revealing what lay hidden. A beautiful young woman and a little girl stood on the threshold. The 5-year-old child and her mother looked terrified, but recognized him instantly. Yun-soo's wife stared in absolute shock. She could not believe her eyes. The man she loved and cherished was standing right there. The husband she had spent several agonizing days mourning was alive. With a burst of pure joy, Yun-soo rushed to his family. He embraced his wife tightly, while his little girl clung to his legs. She squeezed her father desperately as a beautiful, emotional reunion unfolded. Just tears, soft sobs, and absolute happiness. The wife explained she heard voices outside and checked through the security peephole. When the emotions settled, they finally remembered their quiet guest. Jeom was still standing quietly nearby, keeping his distance to respect their moment. Yun-soo quickly introduced the young man as his true savior. Without Jeom, getting back home safely would have been impossible. But Jeom was already extremely far away in his own quiet thoughts. Fighting endless monsters had completely drained him. He had not slept in days. His heavy eyelids finally fluttered shut, and he fell fast asleep. He dreamed of his father sitting with a very solemn expression. They were attending his grandfather's funeral when his father spoke of grief. He explained that saying goodbye does not always mean pure sadness. Deep connections bring gratitude and affection, not just painful regret. Therefore, the final parting is not merely a tragedy to endure. He felt immense gratitude for the chance to experience true love. Giving completely without asking for anything back is hard to truly understand. But someday Jeom would grow up and realize its value. Love is never easy to receive or give. Then his dream shifted. He saw his older sister practicing martial arts moves on him again. She always made excuses, claiming she never actually hit him. She used a pillow to soften the impact, but he still tattled. Their father never took sides, knowing they would eventually learn their lesson. One day they would stop bickering and realize how precious family is. That quiet, unyielding love would always be their most valuable treasure. Years drifted by, the kids grew up, and life got busy. Gathering everyone around the dinner table became a rare, near impossible task. As they grew up, they drifted further apart. Still, his older brother advised Kim Sol to join boxing gym. Soon, it was time for Jeom to start middle school, and he was thrilled and incredibly proud of himself. Unfortunately, the other boys wanted nothing to do with him. Their school uniforms and phones were way more expensive, and they looked down on Jeom. He was wearing his brother's old hand-me-down jacket, tattered and full of holes. Because of that, nobody wanted to be his friend. To make things worse, his classmates loved practicing their punches on him. Besides Jeom, there was another kid with glasses who got thrashed daily and couldn't even stand up for himself. Naturally, both of them were labeled as total weaklings. One day, right as a bully was about to land a devastating punch, someone caught his arm and locked it in place. That savior turned out to be his older sister, who had spent years using Jeom to practice her martial arts moves. Kim Sol declared that from that moment on, Jeom would train with her every morning. It was the start of a whole new nightmare for Jeom because his sister absolutely brutalized him with intense workouts while teasing him like they were kids. Fast forward a few years, and Jeom was now entering high school. No one dared to mess with him anymore because he had grown incredibly fit and unbelievably strong. Soon, his family received some incredible news. His older sister Jooyoung got accepted into medical school. Years flew by, and soon there was major news about Jeom that his parents had been waiting for. By then, the boy had fully transformed. He was a powerful, handsome man, ready to protect those around him. Finally, it arrived. His military draft letter. His parents, along with Kim Sol, proudly sent off the young man who was destined to become a top-tier elite warrior. His family begged him to stay strong and take care of himself out there. With those final goodbyes, Jeom's childhood officially ended. Alongside the other recruits, he marched off to serve his country, and then things get wild. Jiom suddenly woke up lying on a bed in a completely strange place. He had no idea where he was or how he ended up there. He figured he must have passed out. Jiom faintly remembered how Yunsu had reunited with his family, but after that, there was only blackness. Suddenly, a strange voice greeted him, just as he instinctively reached for his camping hatchet. Peering out, he saw a woman and a little girl eating dinner peacefully at the table. Nearby, completely wiped out from the road, Yunsu lay asleep on a mattress. The woman gently explained that Jiom had fainted from exhaustion, so they moved him to the bed to let him rest. Jiom stared in absolute horror at the sharp axe still clutched in his hands, realizing he could have easily struck these innocent people in his panic. Shaken, he quickly stored the deadly weapon back into his subspace, then asked how much time had passed while he was out cold. The woman smiled and said it had only been 3 hours, but she immediately thanked him for saving them. Her husband chimed in, saying they only made it this far because of Jiom's incredible power, and now their family was finally reunited. Just then, Yunsu woke up and declared that Jiom had saved his life countless times, making a little driving help seem like absolutely nothing. Hearing what Jiom had done, the woman assumed the young man was starving and suggested they eat before talking any further. But Yunsu refused to touch a bite alone, waiting for his friend to wake up first. So they could share the food. She cooked a stewed fish, just like his mother used to make. The young man was genuinely touched by the deep warmth shown by this kind family. He told them it was his absolute favorite luxury-level dish. Soon, the mother and her daughter slipped away, leaving the men completely alone to eat and talk in peace. Honestly, it was the best meal Jiom had eaten since leaving his parents' home to serve in the military. Soon enough, their incredibly delicious lunch was completely finished. A wave of nostalgia hit him hard. He remembered his family and the warm meals his mother always used to cook. Once they finished, Yunsu got straight to business, saying he wanted to take Jiom to his own relatives, which completely surprised the guy. But Yunsu insisted he had already cleared the plan with his wife, and she fully supported the choice. Jiom hesitated, pointing out that the nearest town was Gangnam was not the final stop of his long journey because he needed to travel much further and would require a reliable car. Yunsu understood completely, but had one condition: they should talk outside first. Standing by the car, the guys kept talking. Yunsu planned to drive the truck to the nearest town, Gangnam, and then he wanted to leave the truck with Jiom in exchange for his electric bike to get back. He planned to ride that bike back to his family, incredibly fast and safe. It sounded convenient, but wait, does this whole setup sound a bit too perfect? Jiom immediately grew suspicious. Sure, Yunsu was a great driver who could easily outrun monsters, but even with those skills, the road was incredibly dangerous. And since Yunsu had already reached his family and brought them supplies, taking another massive risk made zero sense. After all, he had come all this way just for his wife and daughter, and now he wanted to risk his life again. Jiom asked him flat out why he was trying to help him. Scratching behind his ear, the driver said he simply wanted to repay his savior, since he owed him his life, but this explanation still felt pretty weird to Jiom. He hesitated, unsure if he should accept the offer, though realistically, if it weren't for Jiom, they would have died in that tunnel, and now Yunsu was just trying to help however he could. They were in the same boat. Their normal lives were completely gone, and each was struggling to survive in his very own way. Even if Jiom had unlocked strong abilities, things were still far from easy. For him, the world was incredibly brutal now. But thoughts of family kept him moving. Naturally, Jiom was also deeply worried about his own people, and this constant stress was crushing him. It would be much better if comrades helped each other make it through. Even if it sounded a bit presumptuous, Yunsu promised to bolt the second things got really, seriously dangerous. He was not stupid enough to throw his life away. Jiom recalled leaving very early that morning to clear out the tunnel, leaving everyone else behind. In the tunnel, he spotted a car with the key left in the ignition, sparking instant hope. Now the young man could actually take this ride and finally make it back to his family. With that drive keeping him going, he headed into the dark tunnel, determined to find them. Jiom explained to his friend that absolutely nothing could break into his pocket dimension. Nobody gets in without permission, and as long as it exists, supplies can be duplicated. Jiom was willing to accept Yunsu's help, but there was one major condition. The driver had to stick by his side for the entire journey. They weren't just stopping nearby, they had to hit all 4 towns holding his relatives. He also wanted to upgrade his subspace so other people could survive inside it. This way, Yunsu could safely settle down inside with his wife and young daughter. If Yunsu agreed to tag along, he had to bring his entire family with him. Plus, hunting down more mutants would give Jaim enough power to upgrade the space quickly. This power boost would make the dimension perfectly safe for everyone before long. While Yunsu helped track down Jaim's scattered family, Jaim would keep the driver's loved ones completely safe from harm. Yunsu eagerly agreed to the deal and rushed to gather his family. Luckily, Jaim had enough upgrade stones to finally level up the pocket dimension. Now other humans could safely step inside. Sure, the system costs spiked heavily, but he decided to worry about that later. Granting access to outsiders, Jaim brought Yunsu's family straight into his secure space. Now watch, they materialized inside the massive logistics center, completely frozen in sheer shock. Towering shelves stretched out forever, packed tight with endless gear and supplies. Best of all, there were absolutely no terrifying monsters lurking around. The entire place felt incredibly safe. Jaim quickly introduced them to Pax, an AI assistant ready to track down and fetch whatever they needed. Even better, this giant warehouse held tons of fresh ingredients. The mother could easily cook anything she wanted with the supplies on hand. Jaim assured them they could grab absolutely anything because the stock was infinite. Whenever something was taken, the system instantly copied it right back. Seriously, no need to hold back, they could take whatever they wanted. Jaim told them to get some rest before they headed out in 30 minutes. A massive mission lay ahead, leaving the family completely speechless. They were overwhelmed with absolute relief and pure, unexpected joy. Jaim took a moment to inspect his newly unlocked traits. His pocket dimension let him store and retrieve any object whenever he pleased. Best of all, nobody could ever enter this sanctuary without his direct permission. When the giant warehouse was absorbed into his private space, Pax's AI merged with the system, unlocking incredible new functions. He could now summon and launch stored items at blinding speeds. With this fusion, his reality-bending space reached a godlike tier. He didn't even have to manually control most of the processes anymore. It felt like he had completely maxed out his ridiculous growth potential. But as it turned out, he was dead wrong. He could instantly store things directly in his line of sight, and even build a lab to fuse and modify items inside. He could craft brand new items, unlocking incredibly powerful skills as he leveled up. But without magic stones, he is stuck, absolute dead end for now. Suddenly, a crazy idea hits him. What if he pulled the entire planet Earth right into his subspace? Of course, the system blocks it almost immediately. Error, the command fails completely, and absolutely nothing happens to the planet. The target is way out of bounds. Still, it was a pretty terrifying thought. Just then, Yunsu walks up, having finished studying the map to the Gangnam district. He points to a different route, suggesting they take a safer road instead. Jaim is pretty surprised. The man is already planning their upcoming escape. Why is he mapping roads instead of spending time with his daughter? But the little girl is doing great. She gathered her favorite toys, played until she wore herself out, and is now sleeping soundly. Yunsu thanks Jaim once again, but Jaim just shrugs it off. They helped each other out, simple as that, perfect balance between them. Soon they climb back into the truck to start their journey. But Jaim gets a bad feeling. The driver has gone completely serious. Yunsu mutters that driving is his only skill, but he does it fast. Jaim hints that he should slow down, but it is totally useless. Too late, the driver is already slamming the gas pedal down. They rocket forward, leaving the city behind at a terrifying speed. Outside the window, the scenery shifts. The roads ahead look completely abandoned. Yunsu explains he picked this route to avoid monster swarms. But for Jaim, this barren highway is totally unfamiliar and unsettling. The road is incredibly bumpy, making him feel pretty carsick. He just wants this journey to end as soon as possible. Suddenly, the truck rolls up to a clearing, blocked by a heavy barrier. It is a serious military roadblock, packed with sharp iron spikes. Passing them without popping their tires is completely out of the question. They scan the area for soldiers, but then headlights flash behind them. A vehicle is tailing them fast, visible in the truck's side mirror. The weapons and equipment look military, but the crew inside is not. They have clearly set up an ambush, waiting to trap the truck. Jaim knows they are stuck in a pretty dangerous spot right now. He opens a hidden compartment for Yunsu to crawl inside. Jaim slides into the driver's seat, deciding to play it completely cool. If they wanted them dead, they would have opened fire already. He counts 3 heavily armed hostiles, closing in on their exact position. As a man walks up to the window, Jaim asks what is wrong. The stranger snaps back, claiming it is a routine inspection. He aggressively orders the kid to get out and pop the trunk. Jaim complies without a fight, revealing a truck loaded with high-value goods. The armed bandits are thrilled to find such a massive, valuable jackpot. They immediately realize they have just captured a wealthy lone courier. Drooling over the loot, the bandit leader steps up to Jaim. He looks him in the eye, ready to make his move. Everything belonged to them now. He demanded to know where the young man was taking these goods. Chong Jaim honestly admitted he took everything from the logistics center. But getting back there now was totally impossible since the roads were completely blocked. Every road was destroyed or blocked. Still, he offered to bring them supplies. If they needed food, he would bring it, but the leader had other ideas. He wanted to know exactly how much food was left inside that warehouse. During their talk, one of the bandits muttered that they had no other choice. Time was running out. Suddenly, the rogue soldiers grew restless and started arguing. They kept saying it was already too late and they had to move fast. They decided to seize the truck, take the food, and deal with the kid. Before Chong Jaim could escape into his subspace, he took a brutal hit. A heavy punch directly to the solar plexus. It was fast, dirty, and incredibly painful. The young man dropped to his knees, gasping for air as pure agony flared. Pain flared through his body. From there, everything went pitch black. They shoved a thick bag over his head, leaving him with only his hearing. He heard them dragging him away, telling someone he brought food from the center. The bag was ripped off. A blindingly bright light hit him, burning his eyes. For a second, he was totally blind, but as his eyes slowly adjusted, he froze. He was tied to a chair in the center of a grim room, completely bound. Across from him sat an absolute stranger, quietly watching from a desk. An armed guard stood by Jaim, and just to his left, he spotted something else. Another prisoner was tied up nearby, slumped over in a corner. The stranger lay in a pool of blood, completely lifeless, not a good sign. The commandant spoke up, mentioning the food truck his men had just brought in. He knew the young man was the driver. Word had traveled fast. Supposedly, this kid was the only one capable of accessing that logistics center. Now the commandant wanted to know if the rumors were actually true. Why was he the only one who could enter, and where was it located? Chong Jaim simply confirmed he got the food from the Kunpo Center. Naturally, the greedy commandant wanted to secure a gold mine like that for himself. But Jaim had questions too. Where exactly was he? What was going on here? Turns out, he was inside a military base. The commandant did not even remember which specific unit they were. Some communications division, probably. Honestly, it did not matter. The military officer did not care. He was not originally stationed here, and he was not going to explain anything. But it would soon be 6 o'clock. The kid would see the truth soon enough. Seeing it in person would be much easier than explaining. Right on cue, a harsh red light washed over the entire room. The commandant smiled, announcing that they had arrived. Here we go. Then a terrifying, familiar screech echoed. Jaim recognized it instantly. Massive wyverns were circling the base, yet they completely ignored the soldiers below. It was like they were invisible to the beasts. Dozens of dragons swarmed above. Soon, their sheer, terrifying numbers practically blocked out all of the daylight. Jaim watched in absolute horror as the giant beasts swept past the window. He warned that these creatures were incredibly dangerous, adding that they were somehow unusually strong, even with the commandant's own powerful abilities during clashes with the wyverns. All of his skills were completely sealed by the beasts. Dragons themselves. He then pointed Jaim toward a soldier who was slumped. On the floor, his hands bound tightly in a pool of his own blood. This guy was a real soldier, and the army actually had a weapon plan to kill the wyverns. But the attack failed, and every single soldier they sent ended up dead. This survivor was spared, but he was feeling incredibly weak, likely holding a lot of highly valuable information, but he was in no shape to speak, starved for days. Still, the commandant was the one running things. He claimed that their military base was packed with weapons but completely dry on food. Jayam had to take his men and go to the logistics center to get supplies. If they succeeded, the young man would officially join their ranks. It was a good deal for both parties since these bandits could offer him some real protection from monsters. Suddenly, Changin mumbled something bizarre about how this area seemed absolutely perfect and requested that Pax transfer the ministry's main communications command directly into the subspace. Total nonsense. The guards standing nearby just figured the guy had completely lost his mind. Then, right before their eyes, the young man and everyone else materialized in a completely different area. They were sitting on chairs right under the open sky, surrounded by towering mountains and a completely ruined city. The sun was shining brightly over everything, painting a deceptively peaceful scene. The men looked around in utter shock, not understanding what just happened or where their secure building had suddenly vanished to. Jayam was still stuck sitting on his chair, with his hands firmly bound, while a guard armed with a rifle stood right beside him. The commandant stared round wildly, unable to comprehend how an entire concrete building could just disappear. Just then Jayam, still tied up in his chair, felt a sudden, violent wave of nausea hit him, causing him to vomit right on the spot. This was the harsh side effect of traveling through subspace. Those ropes needed cutting quickly, no time. A sudden, terrifying sound echoed through the entire valley. A massive flock of wyverns was descending on them, locking every eye in place. Everyone stared in absolute horror as those flying bringers of death drew closer. The beasts were massive, boasting giant wingspans and heavily muscled bodies. Their jaws were lined with razor-sharp teeth, ready to feast. Once the initial panic broke, the terrified crowd scrambled to run away. Jayam ripped himself free from his bindings, desperately trying to focus his mind, and readied his camping axe. Meanwhile, the commandant finally snapped out of it, screaming at his soldiers to stand their ground and open fire on the smaller wyverns immediately with their guns. His plan was to focus fire and target the larger ones next. If guns failed, he would unleash his own raw power, but as it turns out, his men were complete cowards. They bolted instantly, leaving their leader entirely alone with the massive beasts. Now the commandant had to face the deadly horde all by himself. Right there, face to face with the giant wyvern, the beast's attention turned directly to Jayam, who was hauling the wounded soldier back into subspace. Jayam quickly opened his pocket dimension. Get in. The stranger was in terrible shape, totally exhausted and barely able to stand. Jayam slipped away. He was safe inside subspace. Still, he needed to start thinking about the consequences of his actions. One bad slip could completely rob him of his 5 senses. Right now, he was totally focused on the chaotic scene playing out outside. The fearless commandant stood directly in front of the wyvern, refusing to run or hide. The massive beast watched him with clear interest, locking its eyes on him. It felt like the monster was actually thinking, or maybe even remembering something. Mind-blowing, it seemed to possess an actual consciousness. The commandant struck first, a heavy fist straight to the chest. That sudden blow definitely got the giant beast's focus right back on him. He screamed out that he had leveled up and was not soft-hearted anymore. He was no coward, and he sure as hell was not running. But the final thing Jayam saw was the wyvern instantly swallowing the commandant. So much for his levels. Back in subspace, Jayam gasped. He took a deep breath and assured himself that he was totally fine. The rescued soldier, however, was in a really bad way, clearly an officer. Those brutal bandits had tortured him, leaving him in absolute physical ruin. He needed deep, uninterrupted rest, fast. He could not explain a thing yet. Luckily, there was no severe bleeding. Still, without a proper checkup, they had no idea what was wrong. For now, the unconscious officer just lay there, fast asleep on the bed. His extreme weakness was mostly just from starvation. They needed to feed him. Soon, Jayam warned his friend Yun-Su that a new structure was appearing. A massive, completely unexpected military complex was slowly unfolding. It was unlike anything they had ever laid eyes on in this life. From the outside, the massive complex looked exactly like a military base. Jayam admitted he honestly had no idea the place was this ridiculously massive. Standing there with a bag over his head earlier, he could not see. Totally speechless, Yun-Su just stood there, his jaw completely on the floor. He could only stare. Meanwhile, Jayam told him he needed to investigate. He tasked Yun-Su with watching over the sick, unconscious soldier resting in their bed. Unbelievable, Jayam had actually stolen an entire military base. Now he was heading straight into the military base to search the place. With a full military setup, there had to be tons of useful gear. He desperately hoped to find some real tactical gear inside those walls. We are talking heavy weapons, crates of ammunition, and actual explosives. Essential survival gear, gas masks, and tactical equipment were all in there. Surviving the apocalypse just got easier, but managing this loot won't be simple. At the logistics center, their loyal AI packs handled all the sorting. He could just order whatever he needed, but this base was different. He would have to manually search every single massive warehouse himself. Everything himself. To make matters worse, Yunsu was not a soldier, meaning he probably had no idea how to handle weapons. Still, he was willing to learn, having already spent too much time in logistics center, but unlike the logistics center, military base supplies are not unlimited. This meant weapons should be saved, focusing on physical strength instead. As Jayam weighed their options, a drone buzzed right over him. It started breaking down some insane news about their subspace pocket. Apparently, the entire space was coded by the pack's logistics network. That meant the newly claimed military sector acted as another warehouse. Everything ran on the exact same rules. Get this once the system finished categorizing all the loot from the new sector. They could duplicate everything just like at the main hub. Every single assault rifle, bullet, and grenade could be copied. The young man stood there, completely blown away by the news. The catch: scanning everything took time. Currently, progress sat at less than 1%, hard to say when it would finish. It was impossible to give an accurate estimate right now. But Jayam wanted those heavy firearms, vehicles, and fuel immediately. Luckily, the drone promised to code those essential items first. This meant Jayam would have instant access to a massive arsenal. Even better, he could lock down who allowed these orders. He trusted Yunsu and his family, but a random soldier was still lingering around. Keeping security tight made perfect sense, with vehicles and weapons secured. Their grim situation in the outside world was looking up. Now they had the firepower to tear through those vicious beasts. Ideally, those creatures would see the guns and run, but everyone knew they would not just run away on their own. There were simply too many monsters, and a single teenager could never take down those massive flying wyverns by himself, so he needed actual help. That meant drafting Yunsu into their tiny military unit. The man had served in the army back then, and now it was time to remember those combat skills. As the guys inspected their fresh arsenal, they planned their next move. Jayam noted if a barrel melted, they could just dump it. They had an endless supply of weapons waiting in the queue anyway. It was a shame the rifles did not come preloaded. Instead, they had to assemble every single round by hand. Neither of them had pulled a trigger in ages, but the pocket dimension offered plenty of target practice. Yunsu raised his weapon. Actions speak louder than words. He was about to show exactly what a veteran could do. An absolute wall of lead erupted, ripping the flying beasts to shreds. They did not hold back, showering the monsters in pure fire. Within minutes of nonstop shooting, the rifle barrels glowed red-hot. Jayam grinned at the devastation. This was exactly what they needed. Even Yunsu had to admit, letting loose like that felt pretty great. Tough as it was, they did pretty well. They slaughtered the smaller wyverns, stacking their massive bodies right outside. The pile blocked the subspace entrance, yet not one living dragon appeared. Despite the quiet scene, Jayam felt a deep sense of unease. He couldn't figure out where the massive, imposing beasts had gone. Those giant guardian monsters were completely missing. This silence alarmed him. As it turned out, his doubts were justified. These wyverns were incredibly smart. One was already waiting to strike. The beast wanted to ambush them the exact second they left safety. They peered into the darkness, seeing nothing, so Jayam devised a plan. His idea was to build a decoy bait and release it outside first. If no new monster attacked the decoy, they could safely move forward. But if it appeared, they would ambush it. The bait was soon ready. They quickly built a mannequin, using whatever random junk they had on hand. They strapped it onto 4 tiny remote-controlled toy cars. Using their remote controls, they steered the mannequin right out onto the street. Suddenly, a massive claw slammed down, skewering the dummy completely. That confirmed their worst fears. A deadly stalker was waiting. This monster was highly intelligent, capable of planning a real ambush. Realizing it was tricked, the beast glared with pure malice. Look at that hateful glare. Jayam aimed his rifle and ordered fire. The giant wyvern leaped backward, trying desperately to avoid the sudden storm of bullets. It scrambled away from the intense wall of fire raining down. Because of its massive size, normal bullets barely scratched it. The round simply couldn't pierce those dense, iron-hard muscles. As the smoke cleared, the uninjured beast charged with jaws wide open. They were safe inside the subspace, but the sight was terrifying. That giant maw right in their faces was pure terror. It just stood there, completely unfazed by their relentless attack. This beast's defense was insane. Jayam suddenly recalled the commandant's warning. The commander had warned that some invisible force blocked every single strike. Right now, those bizarre words finally made perfect sense. Jayam realized its tough hide wasn't the issue, there was an external barrier. Some unseen shield was negating all of their high-caliber damage. Since hiding wasn't working, Jayam decided to go on the offensive. Leaving Yunsu safe behind cover, he prepared to leap straight into danger. They had an infinite arsenal, and it was time to use it. Vaulting out onto the street, Jayam opened fire with everything. He unleashed heavy firepower on the giant beast. The street erupted in flames, ground shaking as they lobbed explosives. Grenades detonated nonstop, rocking the concrete right at the wyvern's feet. Heavy smoke quickly blanketed the battlefield from their constant barrage. Their hands grew numb, shoulders aching fiercely from the brutal recoil. They only stopped firing when their muscles completely gave out. Hoping this overkill was enough, they watched as the haze slowly drifted. The smoke dissipated, and the dragon reappeared before them, completely unharmed. It stared back with an unblinking, knowing gaze, clearly understanding everything. Total awareness, the giant wyvern clawed desperately at subspace now. The monster kept clawing, completely ignoring the massive barrage of explosives earlier. But suddenly a distraction, something caught the massive beast's attention. The creature slowly turned its head toward a distant sound. With a massive flap of its wings, the giant beast took off. It soared away, leaving the young men alone in silence. Zero answers, they quietly exited subspace to inspect the area. Looking around, they began to assess the extreme scale of destruction. Clearly, the massive beast had escaped. It was time for them to leave too, so they scrambled into the car. They sped away just as two guards elsewhere heard a sudden noise. A nearby barricade of stacked cars had just been blown to pieces. Some massive, dangerous threat was drawing near. That heavy steel wall was too sturdy to simply collapse on its own. A powerful new projectile, forged in Jayam's subspace, had shattered the obstacle. As the thick smoke cleared, the panicked guards spotted approaching headlights. An armored military vehicle was barreling toward them, its intent totally unknown. It traveled at a terrifying speed, leaving the men zero time to react. They stood completely frozen, too shocked to plan their next move. Well, that driver was clearly not here to make friends. The guards squinted through the dust, trying to gauge how dangerous these newcomers were. Armed with nothing but basic batons, their chances of survival looked incredibly slim. Suddenly, the front passenger window rolled down, cutting through the tense standoff. A handsome young man leaned out, asking if Nurse Kim Ju-young was stationed there. Back in their childhood, Jayam and his middle sister used to make massive messes. They ran around causing a racket, constantly disrupting their hardworking older sister. At the time, she was intensely studying for her medical school entrance exams. Kim Sul actually believed her older sister was ill due to this sudden behavior. Studying constantly instead of playing seemed highly suspicious to the younger kids. They convinced themselves she was sick and desperately needed their mother's help. Ju-young was 8 years older than Jayam, making her sudden shift very noticeable. When she suddenly locked herself away to study, the entire household became alarmed. But the young girl explained that she had finally found a true purpose. A dramatic dream had completely altered her outlook on life and her habits. One particular novel she read during those days had deeply inspired her. She decided that even if the world ended tomorrow, she would still help others. Caring for the sick and suffering until her last breath became her ultimate goal. Her younger siblings could not comprehend her sudden burning desire to become a nurse. Soon enough, her hard work and relentless dedication truly paid off. Academic grades skyrocketed, proving this was far more than a passing phase. She was accepted into medical college, making her childhood ambition a reality. Now, standing on the dusty street in her uniform, she could barely believe her eyes. Tears of absolute joy overflowed when she finally recognized the face before her. Then the questions came flooding in. Where had he been all this time? How did he find her? Why wait, Chong? Jayam couldn't hold back either, weeping from pure relief and joy. He thanked the heavens that they were finally together. His sister Juyeon was standing right in front of him, alive and unharmed. They held each other tight, showering each other with kisses while sharing. How incredibly scared and lonely they had been, fearing they would never see each other again. Once the heavy tears finally stopped, Jayam introduced his friend, explaining that this was the man who helped him reach his sister. In turn, Juyeon thanked Lee Suyeon for saving her brother and pulled out a stashed chocolate bar from her pocket, saved for emergencies, to share with the men, knowing food was now worth its weight in gold. Jayam tried to insist there was no need for such a treat. He had something more urgent, a wounded patient who desperately needed medical care. Juyeon went straight to work, demanding they bring the patient out immediately of the car right away. However, it soon became clear the patient wasn't there. He was locked in a subspace only accessible with Jayam's peculiar power. The nurse realized her brother had awakened, and though it shocked her, these awakenings were getting pretty common lately. Jayam didn't want to open his pocket dimension around strangers, keeping his powers hidden. But Juyeon agreed, noting there were far too many prying eyes around, making open actions impossible. Led by the nurse, the boys searched the hospital, looking for a private room to safely slip inside the subspace. Stepping into his logistics center, she couldn't hold back her shock. The entire place felt utterly unreal. In addition to this massive depot, her brother apparently also controlled a full military complex packed with weapons. Jayam promised to explain everything later as they rushed the medic to the wounded soldier, still motionless on his cot, barely showing any signs of life. He was trapped in a deep, death-like slumber. Juyeon asked exactly how long he had been like this, but nobody had that answer. Jayam had simply stumbled upon him unconscious, and it looked like he was brutally tortured beforehand. His time adrift was a mystery. Juyeon's medical verdict was grim. The dying soldier simply did not have much time left. Things looked incredibly bleak, but there was still one desperate option left. As it turned out, Juyeon had also awakened a special power, becoming a class healer, though her magic was still at a pretty low level, meaning fixing this soldier up would take a massive effort, and fully curing him was unlikely. Still, she could save his life. Placing her hands on his chest, a soft glow began to flow, but she suddenly stopped. The soldier was suffering from extreme, life-threatening starvation. Severe starvation had become far more dangerous than his actual wounds. He needed time, and with some decent food, he'd bounce back much faster. Jayam suddenly recalled what his sister used to say about the end of the even if the end of the world came, she would still heal the sick. Jayam admitted he finally remembered all her words. Now, he realized how crucial family really was in anyone's life. Once done, Juyeon asked Jayam to tell her everything. She wanted to know about his powers. The story was long, though, so they decided to talk over a hot dinner instead. It turned out Yeonwoo's wife had recently baked bread, so they gathered in the kitchen. Jayam started explaining how he had escaped that locked warehouse and realized that he had somehow become the owner of an entire logistics center. Then he saved Yeonwoo and met the other survivors in town, helping them return to their homes after clearing out the tunnel. He shared his crazy survival story while his sister absolutely devoured her meal. With intense speed, she listened very attentively, even while chewing like crazy, without a single pause, while Jayam kept going, passionately recounting his wild survival adventures. Juyeon thanked Yeonwoo's wife for cooking such an incredibly delicious meal. His wife also mentioned she prepared a comfortable first-floor room for the sister, where she could stay. After that, Jayam explained how he brought Yeonwoo's family straight to his warehouse. Now, Jayam's main goal was bringing his entire family to this safe place. With his older sister safe here, he could calmly head straight to the next dangerous town to rescue his middle sister, currently the city of Yeoljiro. But then Juyeon completely shocked him. No, she would not remain here. Sure, it was comfortable, but at his base, Jayam had to understand her perspective. Dozens of people back at the hospital, patients needed constant monitoring. Yet that was not the biggest issue because other medical staff could handle them. The real danger lay somewhere else. Entirely outside, the massive area surrounding the hospital buildings looked completely dead and heavily deserted. Right then, a sinister man stared into the dark night, listening to his guard's urgent report. The guard explained that two strangers had arrived that a massive crash echoed, and their defensive barricade of wrecked cars completely collapsed into ruins, and then a military truck rolled in. The guards insisted they were not elite special forces, and one of the men inside was actually the younger brother of their nurse, Juyeon. Luckily, these strange newcomers showed zero hostility toward the doctors staff, meaning there was no immediate threat. Still, the chief of the infectious disease department, Sunhak, figured these outsiders just wanted food and shelter for the night. Their rations could easily be restricted, and they could exploit nurse Juyeon could be exploited as leverage. Besides, no matter how powerful these intruders were, they stood zero chance against the monster backing the doctor, a giant bruiser boasting a massive, bull-like neck. Scoffed that absolutely no one could match his raw strength. Sunhak ordered his giant fighter to welcome the strangers first and pretend to be nice. The brute laughed, saying he had already rebuilt the smashed wall and reinforced it. Meanwhile, Jaeam listened closely as Juyeon explained how patients suddenly transformed. She suspected either intentional poisoning or severe drug withdrawal. It turned out Sunhak, the head of the infectious diseases department, was abusing his power to drug survivors and control them. In fact, almost every single awakened patient had tragically died, except for Juyeon explained that the patients were basically addicts, controlled by the doctor who guarded his food and magic stones. To this day, she still had no idea why other nurses never became hooked, but she kept stealing magic stones to boost her powers, hoping that if she leveled up just a tiny bit more, she could cure them all of their terrible habits. She wanted her brother to leave and search for the rest of their family, promising she would find a way to survive on her own here. She even demanded that he leave immediately. She was terrified for him because the situation was far too dangerous for her to handle alone, but Jaeam was not scared at all because the doctor only controlled people using food. He planned to solve that issue as fast as possible. In the meantime, he wanted her to take a closer look and see what insane powers her brother actually had to end the pointless arguments with his sister. Jaeam immediately activated his delivery skill. Massive boxes full of fresh food and medicine suddenly piled up into giant, towering stacks. He brought vital supplies to help the patients and strip all leverage from the greedy doctor. Soon, a panicked subordinate rushed to the department head and urgently reported that Juyeon's younger brother had brought a massive hoard of food. This news deeply irritated the greedy doctor. Even knowing there was an absolute mountain of supplies did not impress him. He firmly believed that two random kids could only carry a tiny haul of food, especially since they had arrived in a basic military vehicle. But the lackey quickly clarified that these guys were not hiding the goods, they were freely sharing everything. Once those supplies ran out, the boy would crawl back to the hospital, begging for his own share of scraps. For the doctor, his job had just gotten a lot easier, since they would not even have to lift a finger. But then, the subordinate dropped a massive bombshell. Those kids somehow had far more supplies than the doctor. It made no sense. Normally, all hospital food had to be rationed from outside, barely filling up a single truck. So how did these two roll up in a small jeep and possess an endless stockpile? There had to be some powerful ability at work here, a skill to manifest items, or perhaps he could shrink massive cargo and expand it back to normal size later. Either way, this guy was incredibly interesting, and they absolutely had to recruit him. The doctor handed his subordinate a suspicious vial of liquid, ordering him to make the sister slip it to her brother. If that failed, well, they would just have to eliminate him. Watch closely. Late that night, canned food and energy bars quietly appeared beside every single patient. Jaeam personally delivered the horde, ready to deal with the monster who was starving and manipulating them. Jaeam slipped out of the ward, searching for the mysterious figure whom, according to his sister, he would recognize instantly. Jaeam needed to find this target fast, wrap up his business here, and search for the rest of his family. Meanwhile, Juyeon had her own quiet plan to disarm the corrupt head of the infectious diseases department by taking away his primary weapon. It would have been incredibly easy to slip some poison into his meals to subdue the powerful addict, but Juyeon was completely unsure what dangerous abilities the sick patients possessed, or if the doctor himself was a physical threat. In this bizarre ward, some patients could literally tear open steel cans. For others, it sounded like a joke, but it turned out to be completely true. Very few people in the world had abilities that were a threat on their own, except for a man named Sun Youngwoo. After chaos swept across the world, he traveled from far away just because he was worried about his sick mother in the hospital. Now, Jaeim was finally going to meet this legend face to face. The man possessed absolutely terrifying physical power. He was built like a tank, making his strength obvious at a single glance. He had literally piled up a mountain of cars near the hospital. Suddenly, a giant named Hyun Woo approached Jaeim, asking if he was the nurse's little brother. Turns out this giant wanted to talk. Standing next to him, Jaeim looked like a helpless middle school kid, but the giant wasn't acting hostile, remaining surprisingly calm when Jaeim mentioned they had some business together. They stepped outside. As they stood there, Jaeim noticed a chilling look in his eyes. It was completely inhuman. It was clear that the man was heavily drugged up on something. Cutting right to the chase, he gave Jaeim a choice. He offered him only two paths: either drink the mysterious medicine right now and join the other patients living peacefully in the hospital, or choose another way. Refuse and he would die on the spot. The giant warned him that running away was not an option. Jaeim honestly did not understand why he brought him to this dark corner. He had no plans to fight or flee anyway. With a massive body like that, the monster would easily catch him. Running away from him was totally useless. Fighting him was even worse. Still, Jaeim decided to throw in a third choice. And that was the path he picked. This unexpected option left Hyun Woo utterly baffled. His massive opponent stared back, confused. Little did he know this option was designed to lure the bully straight into a trap. Without wasting another second, Hyun Woo lunged forward to grab him, eager to make good on his threat. But Jaeim easily stepped aside, perfectly calm. Instantly, the air began to shift. Subspace activated, warping the surroundings and leaving the thug grasping at thin air. Hyun Woo could not even process what was happening before he could react. A highly charged bowling ball came flying out of the subspace at high speed. One hit was not going to stop a giant, so Jaeim launched several more. The heavy impacts finally broke his balance, forcing the brute to double over. After all, Hyun Woo was still flesh and blood, and he definitely felt that pain. As the giant hunched over, Jaeim started dropping heavy 20-kilogram barrels right on him. He warned the massive thug to stay down, unless he wanted a broken spine. The sheer weight of the impact would break his bones. Soon, more barrels landed, trapping Hyun Woo inside a thick, barricaded wall, but the brute refused to give up. Desperate to escape, he dug his hands into the metal barrels. He squeezed with raw power, attempting to crush them. He actually had enough strength to tear the whole barricade apart, which genuinely surprised Jaeim. He had never met anyone this strong. The monster was catching high-speed falling barrels, stacking them up as if it were nothing. However, brute force was Hyun Woo's only real asset, as he desperately swatted away the flying metal barrels. He kept piling them around himself, completely oblivious to the trap he was building. Soon, Gum thanked him for helping set up this trap and told him not to worry. He just needed to wait here for a bit, and he would soon be free. His name would be cleared once everything was sorted out. Meanwhile, the noise stopped. The falling barrels finally settled, leaving Hyungu completely blocked off in a cage. He was trapped under multiple heavy layers of wood. Gum felt slightly bad for him. Gum hoped the guy would not get hurt or hit the hard railing. Still, Hyungu was a tough fighter who could definitely handle a minor setback. With the brute safely secured, Gum headed into the hospital to face the mastermind. He quickly let his sister know that the meeting with the brute went perfectly. The plan was for Hyungu to remain inside the barrel tower for now. That way, they could easily coordinate the next steps of the plan. Ju Young mentioned she had finished feeding all the patients around the ward. Now they simply had to wait for Yeonsu to get back to them. Right on cue, Yeonsu walked in, clutching his head in absolute agony. He was completely doubled over, clutching his chest in pain. His skull felt like it was splitting. Could this be the effects of that deadly clinic poison taking hold? Ju Young grimly agreed, noting that a splitting headache was indeed the main sign. Yeonsu was completely baffled because he had only handed out some food. He had only talked to a few grateful patients. How did they get to him? That was when a sharp nurse spotted a strange, fresh cut on his forearm. It looked like someone had quickly slashed Yansu without him even realizing it. Though only a minor scratch, the blade was coated in poison. He just missed the contact entirely. The group immediately decided to retreat into the safe subspace to recover. They had to get Yansu away from everyone and keep him isolated. This was a terrible situation because Gum had no idea what this poison did. If their friend fully lost control, everything they built would go up in flames. They absolutely had to find a skilled doctor immediately. In the meantime, Gum tried to lock his friend safely in the recreation room. He barricaded the doors and windows to make sure he could not escape. But the pocket dimension absolutely refused to let them shut the doors. The system was actively rejecting a dark, external energy clinging to Yansu. Strangely, the moment the rejection began, the young man's headache vanished completely. Just then, Hyungu smashed through his wooden prison and rushed toward them. He tried to force his way into their safe haven alongside his crew. Gum instantly blocked the brute, sending him crashing onto the floor in confusion. This entire situation was getting stranger by the second. It turned out the subspace defended against physical force and telepathic attacks alike. Once the mind control broke, the reformed thug went to see his mother. He tearfully confessed to all the terrible things he had done under the influence. She held him close, saying he was not to blame for being manipulated. He promised her he would return home as soon as his work here was finished. Gum offered to let him tag along, but Hyungu politely declined. He chose to stay at the clinic to fix the mess he had helped create. Abilities, honestly, Hyungu's painful memories were still far too fresh. He felt deeply ashamed for following the chief physician's orders, and guilt consumed him. The young man desperately wanted to thank Gum and apologize for all the harm caused. The big guy swore he'd always be in Gum's debt, but he still had a couple of private matters to handle. Meanwhile, the department head was busy checking subspace data inside his office when his top subordinate, the big guy, walked in. The doctor had no clue why his connection to his powers was suddenly severed, but right now, he absolutely needed to tell Hyungu something incredibly critical. He practically begged the giant man, desperately asking him for mercy. His life, but Hyungu had completely different plans and wasn't about to take any more orders from this pathetic doctor ever again. One massive punch from his heavy fist was all it took to settle the score, ending this vile trash once and for all. Next, the group gathered for a quick meeting to discuss helping patients beat their addiction. Gum suggested they should first figure out which people were truly hooked. To do this, they needed to bring them into a subspace to monitor them. This would let them see their reactions and assess everyone's mental state. Once the testing was done, they'd construct a proper plan to treat the withdrawal. But wait, before they could even start executing their plan, bizarre anomalies started taking over the patients across the entire hospital ward. One random patient suddenly snapped out of his daze, stood right up, and realized he was finally sane. He understood how completely crazy he had been all this time. He was fine now. The man realized that he was fully cured, and the dark influence of the drugs had vanished. Worn off, talk about a chilling sight, Hyungu walked up, his clothes completely stained in blood, calmly announcing that he had settled everything. Then, bowing deeply, he thanked his savior on behalf of his mother and everyone else. Gum knew exactly how the bully had dealt with the evil doctor. And just like that, all these people had fully recovered. No need to waste time treating them anymore. After that, Gum apologized for going so rough on him by tossing heavy bowling balls. Hyungu laughed, admitting he was utterly stunned. He had seen crazy monsters, but never a storm of heavy barrels and bowling balls from the sky. The giant joked that no beast could compete with Gum's terrifying physical strength. That brought a genuine laugh to the entire group, including the mysterious young man who still barely understood his own insane power. Hyungu turned to the young man, asking him to stay at the hospital despite knowing how selfish that request was, but Gum had his own immediate goals. He wanted to track down the rest of his family, meaning he had to depart very soon. Hyungu admitted he just had to ask him, but he respected his choice and hoped he would find his relatives in peace. Gum revealed their next stop was Yuljiro. Hearing this, Hyungu, local born in that town, warned him that traveling there was incredibly dangerous. The very next day, massive piles of food and survival gear arrived. leaving a deeply grateful Hyungu to endlessly thank his savior for the help. His rescuers promising to repay them later, the men shook hands, agreeing to meet up again soon. After that, Gum and his loyal driver hopped into the car and drove off. Driver asked about the massive obstacle the giant had mentioned. It sounded serious, likely tied to powers. They would cross paths with the right ally, otherwise progress was impossible. According to Hyungu, a massive wall had literally grown right between the cities. It sounded crazy, but a colossal stone barrier had indeed erupted from the earth when the giant fled to find his mother. That wall stood taller than any skyscraper, making land travel impossible. Breaking it was unrealistic. On top of that, Hyungu discovered that the local monsters lurking in Aljero were completely different. Even their skeletons, which Gum had never heard of before, were dangerous. The big guy called them undead. They kept rising after being killed, and their empty shells just kept wandering around. Unkillable monsters and a giant wall looming over the skyscrapers made Aljero a terrifying zone in every single way. But get this, Gum was not worried at all about his second sister, who lived right there. In fact, he felt totally sure she could handle those monsters, even without special abilities. Suddenly, a call came from subspace, who was looking after the soldier. She told Gum that their patient was fully awake. She wanted to know when to head back so they could talk. He decided to return instantly because this soldier might have crucial info. The man thanked them for saving him and introduced himself. He was Han Kyung-ho, a lieutenant colonel who led the Ministry of Defense's Information Corps. Han admitted that he was completely lost. Outside, he could clearly see the headquarters of the Armed Forces Command, but none of the surrounding buildings looked familiar. The soldier was totally baffled. Gum stepped in to explain that they were inside a logistics center break room, tucked within a subspace created by his own power. Outside was the town of Hanam, and they were driving toward the bridge. This news absolutely shocked the soldier. Gum's sister broke it down in simpler terms. This entire pocket dimension existed solely because of her brother's unique ability. Right now they were actually in Canum. The colonel asked if they would mind letting him out nearby. Clearly, he still could not fully process this crazy idea of spatial travel. Gum quickly jumped in, reassuring him that he had zero intention of hurting him. Han agreed, stating he did not view them as a threat, since they had literally saved and healed him. It was not about mistrust, but something far more urgent. He had no words, but he had to reach the Joint Chiefs of Staff immediately. There was a major emergency brewing. Just then, the robot packs rolled over with banana milk and a sandwich. Talk about perfect timing. Gum was a recently discharged soldier himself, so he knew exactly how military guys worked. They are always starving, so he promised to free Lieutenant Colonel Khan right after they finished eating. After all, a starving person finally getting a hot meal makes them much friendlier. And honestly, who doesn't get nicer after eating? Lieutenant Colonel Khan was no exception, and as his favorite meal was placed before him, the man opened up and explained how interdimensional creatures first started popping up everywhere. And these savage beasts were definitely not just your typical mindless monsters. They viciously destroyed absolutely everything in their path. Even other creatures that crossed over with them got completely wiped out. While governments scrambled to fight back, a darker plot was unfolding. The monsters quickly started recruiting various awakened humans. They built highly specialized strike squads out of these new human recruits. At first, these teams actually worked, making it look like the zone was finally clearing up. But then the real disaster struck when a truly unstoppable creature finally showed up. No tank, missile, or bomb could even scratch this massive dragon. They desperately tried to band together, but their overall combat strength had already been severely diminished. They were decimated by the monster, and high command went totally silent. There were no replies or orders, which felt incredibly suspicious to everyone. Lieutenant Colonel Khan reached out to other units, but none of them came to help, leaving his squad completely stranded with no backup. It became painfully clear that staying put meant certain death by the hands of this dragon. So they quickly marched directly toward command headquarters. Countless comrades were brutally slaughtered by the relentless pursuing beast. Desperate, the remaining military had to beg the powerful awakened ones to help them advance. After several grueling and dangerous battles, they finally reached the base. But as they had already feared, the massive headquarters was completely empty. They quickly uncovered the terrifying and sinister reason why after searching deep through the archives. Inside were highly classified files detailing a massive plot for an immediate military coup. Right after discovering this, Lieutenant Colonel Khan desperately tried to warn High Command. Instead, he walked straight into a deadly trap where the dragon relentlessly ambushed his unit. And those very awakened ones he trusted, they ruthlessly slaughtered his soldiers and seized command. Now, a magic core is blocking the government from mobilizing reinforcements. Even the command chief betrayed his own country. Think about it, a betrayal of this scale happening completely in secret. Lieutenant Colonel Khan has to report this massive betrayal immediately. Gom was deeply troubled by this news, but his main priority was still finding his sister in Ilgir. So he offered to drop the officer off near the Han River Bridge. The lieutenant colonel expressed his deep gratitude, suggesting they part ways right there. He insisted that Gom could just drop him off right here and not worry about his safety. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Colonel Khan kept staring, desperately trying to figure out who this mysterious savior actually was. Surviving a direct encounter with that terrifying dragon meant this young man possessed absolutely unreal power. But looking at him, his power was completely hidden. At that exact second, a massive goblin suddenly materialized right outside the entrance. It blocked the entrance to the subspace. The two did not even blink, completely ignoring the threat, but then a massive barrel flies out of thin air, smashes into a goblin, and sends him flying. Miles away, Khan stood there utterly bewildered. Nothing made sense, then a whole military truck materialized. Khan could only stare in speechless, utter shock. Gom offered the colonel some food, telling him to rest while they drove. From inside, Khan could watch the entire battle. Through an open portal, Gom began launching heavy metal discs. A summoned war machine was just completely absurd. No logic could explain how this kid wielded such godlike power. Perhaps his severe head injury was still playing some incredibly wild tricks on him. Right then, another giant goblin leaped directly in front of the moving vehicle. It raised a heavy club, but a volley of 20-kilogram metal discs immediately flattened the beast entirely. Why die alone? A stray barrel combined with the spinning metal discs to instantly sweep three monsters off their feet, mind-blowing. Khan watched the entire spectacle as if he were at the movies. Then came the cleanup crew as glowing magic crystals suddenly began rising from the fallen beasts. They hovered in the air, pulling themselves directly out of the corpses, before getting sucked directly back into the waiting portal, leaving him totally mesmerized. This was no illusion. The young hunter was actually launching heavy weapons like a railgun, striking monsters at incredible speed, firing up to 4 times every single second. In different directions, constantly replenishing his massive stack of discs, all while casually extracting those glowing magic stones from the dead beasts with ease. It was a beautiful, terrifying dance of death. Talk about a real showstopper. Soon, Khan decided he could not just lounge around in safety anymore. He stepped out of the pocket dimension subspace. But crossing the river was going to be completely impossible for them. The bridge ahead was entirely destroyed. Yet Gom's spirits remained high. He reassured the older officer they would easily find another path. It would just take a detour. Khan thanked the young man again, insisting he was in absolutely no rush at all, and decided that heading back inside subspace was his best option. He was deeply impressed they had covered so much ground in just 1 hour. While navigating heavily ruined roads and constantly fighting off deadly beasts, simply unreal. It was crystal clear that Gom's combat abilities were only half the equation. The guy behind the wheel had insane driving skills. Regardless, Khan quickly retreated back to subspace because his stomach was violently protesting from the wild, dizzying ride. But he had already drawn clear conclusions about his new comrades. They were an incredibly dangerous duo, and their teamwork was nothing short of brilliant. The two guys soon stopped at the next bridge to assess the situation. They had to see if crossing here was possible. But then a bizarre, low rumbling echoed from just over the hill. Ahead lay a colossal, impenetrable wall blocking the entire horizon. It was so tall it could easily be seen from miles away. Gom frowned. Even with his broken magic, blasting this barrier apart was going to be tough. They decide to drop off the lieutenant colonel since they are heading that way anyway. The military base is right on their route. They make the stop. He arrived alive, completely unharmed, the relieved officer steps out. The officer warmly thanks his young rescuers, who wish him the absolute best. Hoping everything goes well, Chang Jiam announces their current business is finally done. Now the only thing left on their agenda is traveling to Aljero. No luck, the massive wall won't budge. His subspace level is simply too low to carry it. Meanwhile, the young man calculates all the magic stones he currently owns. He is busy estimating how many more he can hoard quite soon when… Knock knock, Lieutenant Colonel Han taps on the driver's window. The officer politely invites them to join him inside for a quick chat. He has an interesting offer because the government actually supports awakened survivors. They provide plenty of magic stones to help boost their power early on. Joining the government ranks means getting some seriously massive backing. Jiam is extremely grateful, however, his family remains his top priority. He can simply harvest the magic stones himself while traveling to Aljero. It fell flat. Lieutenant Colonel Han is visibly disappointed. But wait, out of nowhere, Jiam gets a pretty wild idea. The military must have functional helicopters, which changes everything for him. That alone makes him willing to stick around, and honestly, can you blame him? Meanwhile, gloom fills the office. The base commander sits alone. His troops are gone. Almost everyone is dead or missing in action. Staring intensely at his tactical map, he tries to locate any surviving squads. Every single move now determines if they can even survive this crisis. It is a desperate struggle to prove the government still stands. Otherwise, they are just a leaderless nation with absolutely no military left. Hour by hour, everything grows darker. Then a distraction. His secretary announces a visitor. It is the lone survivor of the 1st National Defense Information Corps. He brings highly critical news, his mere survival being an absolute miracle. They are alive, seeing each other after all that chaos is emotional. Neither can believe they actually survived to meet like this. Lieutenant Colonel Han quickly hands over a crucial set of retrieved documents. A plot to overthrow the government. The commander reads it, completely horrified. But Lieutenant Colonel Han reassures him that hope is not entirely lost. He brought allies, people who can actually help save them right now. Intrigued, the commander heads downstairs to personally thank Jiam and his crew. He praises their heroic efforts for the safety of the entire nation. Lieutenant Colonel Han explains the crew's unique skills and dangerous abilities. He shares Jiam's bold request to trade for a helicopter, ammo, and food. Sure, helicopters are incredibly valuable strategic assets, but given Jiam's insane strength, they might actually consider making the deal. The commander has a condition: they must enlist. After all, the military is desperately struggling to handle the endless threats. If they enlist in the military, maybe they can fix this mess. But Jeong tries to explain again that right now, nothing matters more than family. Protecting his loved ones is the only mission that truly counts for him. The commander actually respects the young man's decision and feels for him. Still, he cannot just hand over a military helicopter to a complete stranger. Jeong accepts the rejection, wishing the soldiers luck and hoping for better days. He wants nothing more than for life to finally return to normal. Getting back into the car, Jeong buckles up and tells Yeonwoo to start driving. But before they can pull away, a sudden knock on the window stops them. The commander makes a quick, personal request. He will trade the helicopter if Jeong helps him complete a single mission. Soon, a military convoy rolls out with Jeong and his driver leading the way. The commander explains that a group of military reserves is trapped in Seoul. They are holed up at the train station, but contact is still holding. The big issue is that aggressive skeletons are completely blocking the road. These are not just basic monsters relying on raw brute strength. They are incredibly annoying, and their endless numbers make it way worse. Every single skeleton has a core glowing in the lower right part of its chest. Without destroying that core, these bony monsters will just keep rising. The commander wants Jeong to clear the path and save the trapped troops. Honestly, this task turns out to be incredibly easy. Jeong's flying disc easily slices through the fragile bones of the undead horde. Soon, the street is covered in debris, and the convoy safely pushes forward. Stranded for so long, the soldiers cheer wildly when they see their rescuers arrive. Shouting with joy, the troops immediately scramble into the back of the trucks. Once everyone is packed in tight, the rescue convoy spins right back around. The standard skeletons prove to be complete pushovers. The The soldiers easily gun them down, but the commander issues a grim warning. He warns them to stay alert because far worse things lurk in the dark. Occasionally, skeleton knights will appear, and they are a different breed entirely. If they spot one, they must avoid a direct fight at all costs. Running away immediately is the safest option, no matter how strong Jeong feels. Just then, a rapid barrage of flying discs slams directly into a skeleton knight. But the beast does not even flinch, standing its ground without taking any damage. The strike does absolutely nothing, leaving both Jeong and Yeonwoo completely stunned. The soldiers in the trucks look on in pure terror at the sight. Clad in heavy armor, this monster truly looks like a nightmare medieval knight. He grips a heavy sword and shield, a tattered red cloak draping his shoulders. Suddenly, the creature begins speaking in a strange, otherworldly skeleton tongue. He drives his heavy blade into the concrete and pulls out several magical gems. With a tight squeeze, he crushes them into a glittering cloud of mana. As the dust settles, the skeleton knight speaks in clear human language. He welcomes the young man, expressing delight at meeting an outsider from another realm. Introducing himself as Gwyn, he claims to be one of the 12 legendary knights. Jeong quickly realizes that by breaking these stones, magic stones allowing the monster to actually speak, the skeleton noted that their flying disc greeting was highly original and asked why. Humans had invaded his territory, the armored skeleton knight went on to state. They were on different levels of development but shared basic morals, so throwing random objects at strangers was probably not a good idea, Gwyn said. Those flying discs were completely useless, as such weak weapons could only hurt. Stupid orcs, but another massive wave of flying discs immediately followed, and the monster realized that absolutely no one was going to talk to him. Jeong had no other choice or backup plan, so he focused everything on launching those discs as fast as possible. The skeleton knight did an amazing job of deflecting the flying discs with his sword and shield. In the next moment, the monster decided to counterattack, charging straight toward the trucks at full speed. The guys were in complete shock. Meanwhile, Jeong kept wondering how the skeleton knight easily sliced through those projectiles as if they were soft tofu, but right then, a brilliant idea popped into his head. He needed to throw another object that would deal damage and bounce off. The sword, Jeong quickly activated track delivery, programming the item to be delivered directly to the chest. Another wave of discs was released from subspace directly toward the skeleton knight, but now they were not just flying, they had a guided trajectory. No matter where the knight dodged, the delivery was going to land, and so it did. A massive stack of discs knocked the skeleton knight off his feet. The monster quickly recovered from the blow and was eventually able to deflect the discs, though he sustained minor damage, but the next blow, delivered with pinpoint accuracy, proved to be much more dangerous. This time, the object had to be delivered directly to the skeleton knight's eye to blind him. A heavy bowling ball did an amazing job of this task, with one ball followed by others, leaving the skeleton knight absolutely no room to breathe. Jeong purposefully targeted specific points on the skull, directing those continuously flying spheres straight to the back, the top, and the left, right, and front sides of his head. The young man set up the sequence of actions for Park Soo so quickly that his jaw even started to ache. The boys could only watch as those instructions were carried out, and Yeonwoo, completely drenched in sweat from fear, once again thanked Jeong for saving him. This knight was clad in heavy armor and represented an even stronger opponent than the giant dragon. He was armed with a shield and sword, making him far more dangerous than a wyvern. It was unknown how long it would take to break his head, but while he was busy, the survivors had to be escorted to safety. The skeleton knight kept taking heavy blows, demanding that they stop immediately and calling Jeong a complete idiot, but the skeleton knight did not seem close to dying because he did not stop talking, so Jeong followed up the bowling balls with massive piles of discs, hitting him from the left, right, front, and back at the same time. Soon, a powerful explosion rocked the very spot where the skeleton knight had been standing, lighting up everything around it with fire. The skeleton knight's skull. The knight crumbled into separate bones, still hissing that he would not die. Even in pieces, his entire existence belonged solely to his king. After those final words, the shattered pieces of his armor rolled across the dark asphalt, leaving him gone. A massive pile of glowing magic stones remained at the battle site. Suddenly, the stones floated up and vanished. directly into Jeong's pocket subspace, the watching soldiers who witnessed. This impossible clash could not believe their eyes. Jeong had destroyed a monstrosity that easily withstood direct tank fire. Cheering erupted from every military vehicle. Jeong had actually won. The commander reminded his squad of the earlier retreat order. Facing that night was supposed to be a death sentence, yet the boys had pulled off the absolute impossible. Once more, the commander asked them to officially enlist in the military. He urged Jeong to seriously consider the offer after reuniting with family, calling them invaluable allies who could do incredible things for surviving humanity. Right after, the commander led them over to the promised helicopters. But Jeong's mind was still stuck on the skeleton knight. He knew he was a hero to these soldiers now for slaying him. Honestly, the praise felt pretty hollow right now. Why? Because if there had been even 2 of those knights, everyone would be dead. And the real nightmare, there were at least 11 more of them. No one knew who their king was, but he was bound to be insanely stronger. Even heavy military shells did 0 damage to that armor, yet his bowling ball cracked it, proving that simple ball was heavier and stronger than a shell. The commander then shared some urgent news from Lieutenant Colonel Han. Apparently, Jeong was heading right toward Allegro, where a massive high wall had suddenly shot up. A military reconnaissance squad went in, but they had completely lost contact with them. Still, the military regularly monitored the city from the air, confirming human activity inside those walls. The remaining units reported that things were stable, meaning Jeong's family was likely totally fine. Thinking of his sister, the young man did not even worry. She was so tough she would easily give any monster a run for its money. However, recent scouting flights spotted something highly unusual. The top of that massive wall was growing, narrowing inward as if slowly forming a roof over the entire city. Nobody knew if it would close entirely. For now, they reached the chopper. Its rusted, beaten-up condition made the boys' jaws drop instantly. It looked like a literal garbage can with a propeller. Jeong seriously doubted if the thing could even get off the ground without falling to pieces. Fortunately, he was looking in the wrong direction. Their actual ride was parked just a bit further down. It was an absolute beauty, completely pristine, armored, and gleaming. Under the sun, the commander proudly presented their real transport to them. He hands it over, calling it the most reliable gear they'll ever find. After all, he can't let anything happen to his future allies. Yeonwoo stares at the Black Hawk, itching to get his hands on the controls and take it to the sky. But the commander stops him. Who exactly is piloting this beast? Records say Yeonwoo has 0 flight hours, and that is absolutely true. He has never touched a chopper, but his system abilities say otherwise. With 50 magic stones, he can instantly master the entire flight manual. He just needs to register the vehicle to pilot this foreign machine. No level up required this time. A simple license cheat code is enough. This is massive news since his level grind is completely on hold. Finding magic stones is still a massive pain in the neck. But just then, the commander tells them to wait up. Leaving the crew puzzled, the commander heads over to the crashed chopper. Inside sits a chest crammed with magic stones harvested from monsters. They have collected about 200 stones from National Defense Operations. This entire stash is a parting gift from the military. The plan was to hide them on board as a surprise. But right now, the guys need every single spark of power. After some quick thanks and bows, Yeonwoo turns to his buddy. Yeonwoo only needs 50 of these, meaning Jaeam can have the rest of them. Instantly absorbing the power, Yeonwoo announces they are finally ready to fly. Jaeam is already sweating, picturing the absolute nightmare of a flight ahead. He knows any pleas for a slow ride will be ignored. Yeonwoo just grins and tells him to brace himself. Since time is running thin, it is probably best to just shut up and enjoy. To dodge the panic, Jaeam opens his status. He sees the massive energy cores he took from the skeleton knight. Just one of those is worth 100 normal magic stones. Clearing out those undead gave him a ridiculous mountain of power. His level is about to shoot up, but something else catches his eye. He checks the details on a rare amplifying stone. This special item can fuse directly with his weapons. It infuses gear with the same blazing fire the skeleton knight used. Without hesitating, Jaeam slots the stone right into his bowling ball. Now it burns with hot flames, ready to melt anything it touches. His drone prompts him to register the flaming weapon. Smart move considering a bowling ball was his heaviest hitter before. Now with fire damage added, his strikes will be absolutely devastating. Meanwhile, the pre-flight checks wrap up and the engine roars to life. The commander salutes, wishing them luck on their rescue mission. Even with his new upgrades, Jayam cannot appreciate the power-up. His upgrades do not comfort him anymore. Because the heavy aircraft is officially airborne, the commander watches them fly away, already plotting how they can build a future together. These elite soldiers, the commander handed the crew magic stones to power up the Black Hawk, hoping they could talk about a real alliance during their very next meeting. Jayam's anxious look made him worry. A dark doubt flashed through his mind. Did he make a huge mistake, letting them take his chopper? Thanks to an upgrade, the logistics center was now far more advanced, yet one major problem remained. It only stored gear. Unregistered stuff was still tough, especially helicopters. Luckily, this counted as military gear, allowing the system to register the vehicle easily. The leader was leaving when a familiar roar echoed. Overhead, the squad was already coming back. Back had something gone wrong. A breakdown? No, the chopper had simply slipped into subspace. Air rippled, the screen flickered, and multiple copies of the chopper began dropping onto the pad. The squad flew off to finish their work, leaving several heavy vehicles behind. The commander was speechless. This was real. Jayam's insane talent shocked everyone again. Soon a massive wall loomed, narrowing like a box. Inside, a dark cathedral glowed with blood-red glass. A menacing figure sat there, the skeleton king himself. He wore a crown, resting his head on his hand. Just then he received some grim news. He sat brooding, unable to understand this. It made no sense. Earth was only level 8. Crossing over meant lowering his own power, yet an arrogant human mage risked the exact same thing, invading his home and killing Gwen. Before dying, Gwen sent a final warning. The knight tried negotiating, but the human attacked instantly. This target was dangerous. Now Lancelot wanted his head on a silver platter, but this mysterious wizard clearly made his move before the dimensional portal fully opened, meaning he had to be eliminated immediately. Because the fight happened outside, they did not have to kill him, they just needed a power stone to track him. Just then guards reported that intruders breached the castle. But the king assumed it was another flying toy and ignored it. Talk about a massive mistake. The roof would shut soon. Meanwhile, giant flying beasts swarmed them. They shredded the monsters with energy discs and flew past the wall. Yunsu said they were close, but landing would be tough, and not due to space. A skeleton knight was down there, locked in battle. The helicopter hovered over the battlefield, unsure of what to do next. A brutal clash was unfolding right below them. A skeleton knight clad in blue armor and a heavy helmet was swinging his massive sword at an unknown enemy. But his opponent didn't fear fire at all, blocking everything with bare, steel-like hands. Those fists seemed completely unstoppable. Suddenly, the mysterious fighter launched a massive fireball straight at the skeleton knight, blasting the monster backward with incredible force. From above, the boys watched this madness play out with absolute fascination. Yunsu pointed out how terrifyingly strong both fighters actually were. Landing now meant they would have to face two monsters at the same time. Jayam asked if he really saw two monsters down there, when Yunsu nodded. The young man delivered a shocking truth about one of those fighters. That monster who had just blasted the skeleton knight away. It was actually Kim Jongjayam's own sister. Back on the ground, the girl stared down at the skeleton knight, wondering how he was still moving. You see, Kim Sol lived for the fight. She loved combat more than anything. She spent her childhood glued to the television, watching mixed martial arts matches. Eventually, she realized her younger brother made the perfect sparring partner since he always wanted to play. Honestly, she couldn't understand why television matches lasted so long when her brother always ended up flattened in seconds. But defeating weaker opponents got boring fast. She never felt like a winner that way, so Kim Sol took her fights outside to the neighborhood kids. And eventually even their parents. Seeing this, her father recognized her talent and signed her up for a real martial arts gym. When she finally tasted her first defeat, she didn't quit. It only showed her she had Room to grow, her wild competitive spirit was officially awake. With unmatched natural strength, she quickly ran out of worthy opponents in the sports world. From then on, she trained with borderline insane determination. Pushing her limits, soon, things got completely out of hand. Even when she tore her ligaments in a major injury, the stubborn girl jumped straight back into training without letting herself heal. More injuries piled up, but she just pushed herself even harder eventually, making her official professional debut last year. Talk about a dangerous lady. Jayam told his friend to bring the helicopter down. The guy was actually planning to drop a bowling ball below them. The skeleton knight had fully recovered from that heavy blast. Standing tall, he demanded to know why none of his attacks could land. Saul casually pointed out that he was just way too slow. The monster snapped back, arguing he was actually faster than most, and that her success wasn't about speed, but some special technique she possessed. Saul shook her head, explaining it had absolutely nothing to do with technique. It was simply his awful posture. His shoulders, waist, and footwork were completely off. Surprisingly, the knight agreed that the basics were vital, happy to learn. He admitted that if it weren't for the current hierarchy, he would have lost already, but if she raised her rank, she could become the ultimate knight. This sounded like total gibberish to her, and she had no idea what. She had no idea what he was talking about. Right then, the knight made a sudden announcement. He decided to let her go. Time was running out, and staying in the castle meant certain death. The warrior even promised to speak with the king and beg for mercy on her behalf. After all, she had shown him genuine respect and taught him some extremely valuable basic skills. But Kim Sol never actually got the chance to hear those final, parting words. Suddenly, the knight shattered into a pile of broken pieces right before her eyes. A massive explosion tore him apart, leaving something incredibly weird in his place. That was a literal bowling ball. Using something like that as a weapon is just beyond bizarre. Yet this ridiculous ball just destroyed the exact enemy Kim Sol could not even scratch. The sheer weirdness was stacking up so fast that none of this made sense anymore. But get this, things were about to get even crazier in there. Glowing magic stones suddenly manifested right where the knight had just exploded. These massive gems shot straight up toward the opening in the ceiling, vanishing into thin air. Just then, a helicopter started descending from above, hopefully bringing some real answers. As the massive helicopter rotors finally slowed down, the heavy cabin door swung open wide. Out stepped a brand new threat, or so it seemed at first glance. It was actually her handsome brother, Kim Jongjayam, arriving right in the nick of time. Kim Sol was incredibly relieved to hear his voice, and he was just as thrilled to see her alive. She greeted him, pure relief. Soon they transitioned into subspace, where Jongjayam and Juyeon quietly watched their sister. They did not want to disturb her as she tested her power. Her unique ability allowed her to generate a highly durable, transparent shield. Keeping it active also gave her physical strength a massive boost. Jongjayam noted they were lucky to have all survived and awakened. Now their absolute main priority was to find exactly where their worried parents were hiding. Of course, Kim Sol immediately started complaining about her older brother calling all the shots. Jongjayam did not argue, pointing out they had to move before the ceiling sealed shut. It was coming down fast, meaning they had to move right now. By the time they reached the exit point, the massive stone roof was already shutting. The young man still desperately wanted to grab those remaining magic stones, forcing a wild sprint. Talk about terrible timing. Right before their eyes, the exit sealed shut completely. Pitch-black darkness swallowed the room. They quickly fired up the helicopter to ascend. They flew straight upward, desperately searching for any remaining crack to squeeze through. As they rose, massive fireballs suddenly erupted from the subspace and flew straight toward the ceiling. The flames pounded the stone barrier, trying to blast a path for the helicopter. Unfortunately, even an explosive barrage of that extreme magnitude did not leave a single visible scratch. It looked like this ceiling was never going to open up again. Our hero really did not want to store this entire massive structure inside his subspace. Besides, his magic stones were running out. He had spent almost all of them replicating helicopters to hand over to the military. It was also highly questionable. Could a fortress of this scale even fit inside his pocket dimension? Or maybe he could pull off the absolute impossible and fit the entire town of Eljero. Right then, Kim Sol realized that the knight had actually been telling the absolute truth. His warning was real. Staying inside this closing castle meant certain doom. He actually wanted to spare the girl inside the castle, giving her a quick chance to escape, but he never got to say another word before a flying bowling ball crushed him instantly. With precious little time remaining, the supreme ruler of the Skeleton Knights had already arrived. In Aljero, Kim had no room for distractions with his trusty companion Yunsu. Activating his special driving ability, the helicopter suddenly jerked, spinning at breakneck speed as it raced across the city in a brand new direction. Meanwhile, back at the fortress of the Skeletal King, word quickly spread that Lionel had been completely wiped out, without even landing a single scratch on his enemy, likely due to some interference from the elusive mage. Yet Lionel left no explanation behind, leaving his allies with a grim, undeniable reality. The king knew the mage was sticking his nose into their business, trying to halt the harvest. If that was true, sitting around waiting was no longer an option, and yet they did not even need to hunt down this meddling magic user. The guy was heading straight for them. Right then, the loud thrum of a helicopter echoed clearly outside the heavy castle windows, and it quickly roared into view. Peering through the glass, the skeletal ruler strained to make out the shadowy figure sitting inside. What he saw filled even his undead heart with dread. The pilot looked incredibly pale, seemingly belonging to some kind of undead race. Still, his arrival saved the king the trouble of searching, and the fool had actually come entirely alone. But the king was not about to waste his own energy on this. After all, he had plenty of hired mercs already stationed throughout the surrounding area. Right on cue, the heavy doors burst open, and a terrifyingly pale man stumbled into the room, dripping with strange, white slime. From his mouth, spitting, he grumbled that he was never setting foot in a chopper again, his motion sickness having completely ruined him. Just then, an ugly orc lunged forward, jaws open wide and ready to swallow him whole. But a devastating punch from his sister instantly shattered the jaw of the beast. A massive blast of fire finished cleaning up the rest. The siblings stepped deeper into the grand hall, fully prepared for any other beasts. It was eerily quiet, but Kim's soul sensed someone waiting just up ahead. Through the shadows, a faint red glow appeared alongside a bizarre, low snoring. A flying bat lay twitching on the floor from her strike, while countless glowing eyes watched from behind. Deciding this was far too dangerous for him, Kim banished their driver into subspace. Yunsu did not complain at all. Kim's soul, meanwhile, was thrilled beyond belief. Honestly, she would have been sad if there was only one target to play with. She told her brother she was taking point. Sprinting straight into the swarm, in a flash her heavy boot crushed one of the beasts, leaving it no time to even squeak or react. The rest of the swarm scattered in panic from the sheer pressure of her attacks. As the girl thoroughly enjoyed every single second of the chaos, she pulverized them with raw physical strikes, backed up by burning waves of fire to finish them off. But during the frantic clash, a sneaky vampire lunged at her exposed throat, aiming to sink its fangs deep. Grinning with pure joy, Kim's soul casually ripped the creature off and slammed it hard onto the ground, hammering it repeatedly from above. To anyone watching from the sidelines, it was clear that Kim's soul was having a blast. Kim stood helplessly in the doorway, blinded by the chaos. The swarm was massive. He had to brainstorm a solid plan, and fast. With monsters everywhere, Kim knew he couldn't just stand there watching. He quickly started analyzing the battle, searching for any way to support his sister. Meanwhile, Kim's soul kept absolutely wrecking the bats, swinging with her eyes shut like it was basic practice. To her, it was like a fun game where she self-imposed hard mode while systematically deleting every single minor monster. Suddenly, the entire swarm veered away from the girl, lured by a strange noise echoing from the portal. The truth was that Kim had actually plugged in an electric bug zapper, which, surprisingly, worked on bats. This was a massive, incredibly useful shortcut because the young man just kicked back in his chair, watching whole hordes fry. The spectral skeleton knight sent by the king to observe the skirmish analyzed everything and was completely stunned. He rushed back to report everything to his king. Besides a wizard wielding bizarre, modern technology, there was a second warrior whose combat skills easily matched a high-ranking knight. The king held his head in despair. Facing this wizard was bad enough, but dealing with both absolute suicide, he could not win alone, meaning it was time to summon the legendary knight Lancelot. Even Lancelot was left speechless that a 7th-level magic user existed on Earth. The entire kingdom would lose their minds, but the reality was even worse. This wizard was at least level 8, even if the king matched that rank, the wizard's raw power was vastly superior, plus that warrior fighting right beside him practically guaranteed their defeat, a loyal skeleton knight named Tristan sacrificed his life force to the king, allowing the skeleton lord to empower his entire army. The skeleton king harvested Tristan's soul stone to summon the ultimate, most devastating blade in his arsenal, handing it over to Lancelot before sending him out to fight. In this grim situation, the king had no choices left. All hopes rode on this clash. Kim Sol was pretty annoyed at her brother for ruining her fun and cutting her fight short. So she went ahead and smashed his bug zappers to pieces. Then, stripping the copper wires, she wrapped them tightly around a heavy baseball bat. Crafting a dangerous new weapon that did not even have a name yet, she was thrilled with her makeshift creation and couldn't wait to test it on the surviving bats. Kim Sol immediately felt the item's upgraded energy and thanked her brother. This electric bat was ready to crack some skulls. Kim warned her, fusing an enhanced item with another actually nerfs its stats, dropping the class to semi-rare and applying negative modifiers, but even so the item, lower tier, remained incredibly valuable and unique enough to dominate a fight. She scratched her neck again. Her brother noticed. The girl finally admitted where she got that bite. She had been perfectly fine until entering and leaving that subspace. Could she be turning into a vampire or some kind of monster? Fortunately, she did not feel any strange changes in her body yet. Maybe her pocket subspace helped purge the toxic poison, but just in case, Kim Sol begged her brother to end her life if she became a vampire. Because she refused to live as a mindless beast, they kept talking until spooky voices echoed from the deep hall. Someone sat high upon a grand throne. Mocking them, the figure on the throne sneered that the name Arcane made him weep. He mocked the legendary wizard for coming in person to such a pathetic place. The king of the skeleton knights demanded to know why the wizard had interfered here. Why cause trouble now? The siblings stared in absolute shock. They realized they were standing right in front of the skeleton king himself. Yet they were secretly thrilled, because this completely saved them the trouble of hunting him down. The king demanded a direct answer, his hollow gaze locked onto his guests. Even if they truly hailed from Arcane, he was cornered with absolutely no other choices. He had to act. Meanwhile, Kim Sol stood there completely baffled by his words. She knew nothing about this Arcane or what was happening. The king growled in frustration. Clearly, talking to them had been a massive waste of breath. Since they refused to speak, there was only one path left for them. They had to die right here. With a wave, the skeletal lord made his move. He summoned Lancelot, ordering the fierce knight to slaughter the intruders immediately. This new threat actually made Kim Sol smile. She was dying to test her weapon. Telling Jaim to stand back, she confidently charged straight at the massive skeleton knight. Sparks flew as they crossed paths. The knight wielded a lethal, heavy sword. Kim Sol countered with her crackling electric baton, but the sheer physical pressure was intense. The girl quickly realized her enhanced strength and wired, but were not enough. Her attacks barely did anything. Suddenly, in one swift motion, she was completely disarmed. Talk about awful luck. The skeleton knight sliced her customized weapon completely in half. It was highly shocking because this semi-rare weapon shattered easily as if made of rubber. Kim Sol immediately realized the terrifying truth of the situation. Her custom bat was not fragile at all. Instead, her opponent was just incredibly powerful. Jaim knew his sister rarely praised anyone. This enemy was the real deal. The knight was truly a beast. To make matters worse, Jaim had no magic stones left. He had completely exhausted his magic stones to craft that custom electric bat. Meanwhile, the skeleton knight steadily advanced, determined to destroy them. But right then, Jaim unleashed a swift volley of fireballs that rocketed toward the threat. The flames flew with deadly momentum, but the knight used incredible, rapid sword swings to effortlessly deflect them, slicing through those incoming fireballs as if they were nothing. His extreme speed swatted away every single spell, absolute martial perfection. But while the knight was busy dealing with those massive flaming spheres, Kim Sol rushed in. She knew his focus was divided by her brother's assault. Seizing the ultimate opening, she lunged forward to deliver a devastating and precise blow. Her fist slammed directly into his helmeted head. The knight swung back in fury, but she dodged like lightning, ducking low under his blade. Escaping the deadly steel, she immediately sprang back up right in front of his face. She delivered a brutal uppercut to his jaw, quickly following up with a heavy left hook. Right on cue, those blazing fireballs slammed directly into their target, and the knight. Lancelot got blasted clean off his feet and went flying. Any hope for quick victory instantly vanished. This monstrous opponent immediately scrambled right back. Up onto his feet, completely unharmed, not a single scratch was left on him. Talk about a cheat code. Jayam was stunned because it hit. The skeleton dead in the head, yet left absolutely no damage behind on him. Jayam suddenly realized this terrifying skeleton knight belonged to the exact same high rank as that massive wyvern they could not beat earlier. He triggered the emergency return function, pulling his sister with him as they warped into subspace. Kim Sol was pretty annoyed that her brother had interrupted her battle. But Jayam firmly believed this situation was far too dangerous for pride. They desperately needed a real plan. It was painfully obvious that those heavy bowling ball strikes did absolutely nothing to this beast. This opponent simply could not be defeated right now. Out in the ruins, the Skeleton King ordered his soldiers to hunt down the humans and slaughter them. The knight even tried breaking through the dimensional subspace using his spear. The siblings watched in sheer disbelief as the monster tried to force its way in. Seriously, how do they beat this? Standing before his control screen, Jayam quickly consulted with his subspace operating system. Together, they decided to blast the undead knight with fireballs at point-blank range to unleash maximum damage, but the outcome was just as disastrous. Even those massive flames exploding right in his face could not slow him down. He casually sliced through them like grapes, completely ignoring the force of their magical attacks. Watching the clash from afar, the Skeleton King analyzed the situation and realized his foe was hiding behind dimensional gates only, throwing out rare items. That defensive strategy made perfect sense if they were evenly matched and merely trying to survive, but these mages were extremely powerful, and Lancelot was a completely invulnerable 7th-level knight. He was immune to their spells, since the king only summoned one champion. He avoided any penalty, yet he still felt his own end drawing near. He had poured every resource into this invasion. Without summoning Lancelot, he would already be dead and stripped of his entire kingdom. Since doom was inevitable, facing the harsh punishment of the Chamber of Commerce felt like a better option. Still, this pathetic spectacle deeply disappointed him. If the king had known things would end up like this, he never would have summoned Lancelot. He stared at the ongoing clash, wondering just how many items his opponent possessed. Curiously, the wizard never used actual magic, meaning he obtained these gear some other way. Wasting precious gear like this made absolutely no sense. And spells were far more efficient. Why hold back? Meanwhile, Jayam watched closely from inside the portal as the knight shrugged off his offensives, desperately trying to figure out his next move. Maybe he could test his new abilities here. Usually, creating premium items demanded tons of magic stones, but now with his subspace at a high level, his powers had expanded. The young man could forge weapons without worrying about any of the consequences. He had to fight these enemies using whatever random gear he had left on him, and his strongest weapon right now was still that bizarre bowling fireball, but that thing was completely useless here. The kid frantically tried to figure out if he should just stay hidden inside the pocket dimension. If that knight took him down near the entrance, the beast could slip inside and heal itself. But suddenly everything stopped. Dead silence. The massive Skeleton King actually started talking to him. He announced that he knew he was facing a human, not some ordinary mage, meaning this human could likely replicate items. This undead boss was pretty sharp. He managed to piece the puzzle together just by watching the battle play out. No regular spellcaster could ever survive in a dangerous place like this. Clearly, the kid had no idea what incredible power he held. The boss suddenly ordered Lancelot to sheath his blade and stop fighting. Since they were not mages, they could actually end up on the same side. They could even be partners. The siblings listened to this bizarre speech, desperately trying to make sense of what this monster was proposing. Seeing their confusion, the king decided to break it down for them. He realized the kid knew nothing and began explaining the whole setup. It started when humans killed skeleton knights on the road to the city, looting the highly valuable strengthening stones that dropped from their bodies. But those stones can only be crafted inside this massive fortress. Known as Camelot, this place generates power stones by sacrificing living souls. These enhancement items are perfect for boosting weapon stats, but they also power up ancient artifacts with unique functions. If used here, you can summon the 12 legendary knights of the castle, which includes Lancelot, who is currently standing right in front of them. These stones are insanely rare, but since the kid has replication skills, the Skeleton King wanted to team up to mass-produce these treasures. Honestly, it is pretty wild that nobody had offered him a deal like this before. Sure, getting the process started might take some time at the beginning, because Camelot has to absorb living souls to forge these power stones. They would have to be patient, but once the first batch is ready, the king guarantees that both of them will get incredibly rich. Plus, his knights would obey any order the boy gave them without question. But right here, Jayam stepped in and cut the king off mid-sentence. He smiled and said the partnership idea sounded absolutely amazing, thanking him. In fact, using the king's advice, Pax did something completely crazy and pulled the entire massive castle of Camelot straight into their pocket dimension. Just like that, the boss lost his home. He looked up to the sky, staring at the open moon, and realized the walls that once protected him and kept him hidden from the harsh outside world were completely gone. The king stood there in complete shock, total disbelief. Then he spotted what was actually left of his giant fortress. It looked like a tiny toy house, resting right in Jayam's palm while glowing. Like a vibrant crystal, the defeated Skeleton King let out a furious scream, accusing the young man of daring to steal royal property, but then a massive, heavy bowling ball materialized in Jayam's armored hand, crackling with blazing energy. Armed with raw magic, the deadly sphere soared straight at the Skeleton King. A violent blast erupted, burying the entire room in smoke and fire. Jayam turned to the Skeleton Knight, demanding to know his name. Jayam asked if Lancelot would destroy his own king. The response came instantly. Lancelot declared he would execute whatever command his master gave. The Skeleton King desperately tried to intervene, but realized that along with Camelot, this mysterious young man ruled over every single knight. This meant Lancelot served Jayam now. Fighting him was completely pointless, and the execution was swift, where the king stood a second ago. A massive purple magic stone shattered. Once the heavy dust settled, everyone saw only broken scraps of armor and a crown on the dirt. The dead king's golden magic stone went to Jayam, transferring all his power. And legion of loyal knights, the kid was shocked by his new stash of powerful magic stones. He lost track of his massive body count long ago. But his sister stepped in, instantly ruining her brother's happy moment. She insisted that if he had any decency, he should give her at least 1/3 of the loot, since she saved him from the goblin horde. Jayam offered a sincere thank you, but argued that her demand was basically highway robbery, especially since he used his own stones to forge her gear. The bickering siblings kept haggling back and forth for quite some time, until they noticed Lancelot standing nearby, quietly watching. The loyal knight was waiting for his new master to decide his fate. They really needed to figure out what to do with this undead warrior. Ready to serve, Lancelot saluted and reported his mission was fully complete. He had snapped the Skeleton King's neck and brought back his core magic stone. No one really had any idea how to treat an undead knight. So naturally, he ended up playing horse for Yunsu's little daughter. She loved riding on his shoulders, having grown quite bored inside the subspace. The girl quickly befriended him, leaving her poor parents totally lost for words. Lancelot was thrilled, figuring that serving his master's family was true loyalty. Surprisingly, this frightening skeleton knight showed a very gentle, caring side. He carefully held the little girl to keep her from falling. Everyone was impressed. He was incredibly attentive and fought exceptionally well despite his apparent youth. Jayam noticed his sisters were already treating the undead warrior like a human. Either way, Jayam planned to head straight toward the Dabong area next. He had a specific house in mind that he desperately wanted to check on. He was deeply worried about his family, but his older sister stopped him. As a caring nurse, she pointed out that he had barely slept lately. She refused to let him collapse from pure exhaustion, urging him to rest. She insisted he spend the night sleeping safely inside the quiet subspace. Her protective sisterly love touched him. Traveling at night was far too risky. Plus, the little girl was still having a blast playing with Lancelot. As everyone turned in, Jayam set out to make a proper spot for Lancelot. He put off sleep. First, he needed to study the Camelot data. Turns out this fortress could expand to different sizes, but the young man did not quite understand how many stones he needed to expand it for 12 nights. Still, he spent 300 magic stones, making the place look quite massive, though something pretty eerie appeared in the subspace. Jayam wondered if all 12 of his knights could actually live together in this castle. Lancelot mentioned it was fine for him, but far too small for their king. Kim Sol was pretty shocked and started calculating how much the Skeleton King had spent to build a fortress covering the entire subspace up to the sky. Lancelot did not know the exact number, but he guessed it took at least tens of thousands of stones. Meanwhile, while Jayam was fully occupied with planning and math, Kim Sol approached Lancelot with a rather personal favor. She had been watching the Skeleton Knight closely and felt deeply impressed by his swordsmanship. Now the girl wanted Lancelot to teach her those moves, even through his heavy helmet. It was completely obvious the Skeleton Knight felt incredibly flattered and gladly agreed to her training. In return, he timidly asked for a small favor of his own. He was quite fond of that sharp jaw punch she used in their fight. Lancelot wanted to learn that exact move. It seemed Kim Sol could not have found a better training partner, and so the night slipped away. By the time Jayam finally slept, Lancelot felt like real family. The next morning welcomed the group with some absolutely beautiful sunny weather. Down below, an armed military patrol was marching through the city streets, keeping a very close watch. The soldiers had absolutely no idea what was happening and stared in utter disbelief. Our group watched all of this from the safety of their subspace. It looked like someone else had decided to make a move, though the timing felt pretty strange. Soon enough, they spotted a massive helicopter descending right near their subspace boundary. This was incredibly surprising, considering only their group and Lieutenant General Yu even owned helicopters. The cabin door slid open, and Commander Yu stepped out. The men shared a warm, incredibly relieved greeting before the Lieutenant General admitted he had been searching for them for ages, ever since he noticed the city's massive fortress wall had vanished. Jayam quietly hoped the officer would not try to drag him back into military duty, but the Lieutenant General had critical news. He desperately needed to warn them that they could absolutely not fly anymore. The rebels behind the recent coup had seized the primary air defense base, shooting down anything in the sky. Here is where things get seriously dangerous. The Joint Chiefs of Staff held an emergency meeting using critical intel gathered by Lieutenant Colonel Khan. Reports confirmed that the rogue First Corps had taken over the capital's entire defense grid, blasting every drone and aircraft out of the sky. Military analysts tracked the firing positions and confirmed the presence of highly advanced anti-air weaponry. This put the loyalist military in an incredibly tough spot. Knowing security was extremely tight, the Lieutenant General remembered the group originally planned to fly straight to Yeojangbu, so he hurried to find them. If they flew there anyway, they would have to make a massive detour. The commander lacked accurate information about the distant terrain. Information on the distant terrain, making it impossible to recommend any route. The news was definitely worse than they wanted, but the team remained steady. Thanked the commander for the warning and decided to rethink their entire plan. Travel plans. If the goal was simply reaching Yeojangbu, they could easily fly around on a safe detour, but Jumu also needed to stop in Dabang, which meant a brutal clash with the rebels in Dabang was completely unavoidable. And honestly, these human rebels were somehow way more dangerous than any monster. It turned out his brother, wife, and parents were facing a massive threat. Threatened not just by monsters and deadly beasts, but also by heavily armed, militarized rebels. Time was running out. He knew they had to move immediately, so he instantly summoned Lancelot. Lieutenant General Yu was so shocked his jaw nearly hit the floor. His eyes practically popped. Jumu explained they had already defeated the King of Knights. Allowing them to finally remove the massive wall. Now tucked safely in the young man's subspace, the knight could assist them well. With this mission, the Lieutenant General reeled upon realizing what was actually happening. The Skeleton Knight was now working with Jumu, who still needed to reach Dabang. With a clash against the rebels, there being completely unavoidable, Lancelot would be a massive asset. Jumu suggested they draft a plan together to wipe out the rebels, creating strategic plans and military operations. Was Lieutenant General Yu's absolute favorite thing to do. So he eagerly agreed. Meanwhile, deep in the dense green forests, massive anti-aircraft guns lay well concealed, watched over by green guards. These green rebel guards also patrolled the cages where prisoners were locked up. The captives were in absolutely terrible condition, most of them were either dead or on the brink of death from starvation and dehydration. This was the grim scene the Skeleton Knight's spirit witnessed. Lancelot carefully studied the layout, estimating the exact number of rebels nearby. One of the green goblins actually wore military epaulets, looking like a twisted human-goblin hybrid. The knight's ghostly form watched and listened closely to their every move, taking in every single detail of the rebel base. One of the great abilities of Camelot Castle was summoning these skeleton knights. A knight in ghost form had absolutely no physical body, passing freely through walls and flying through the air. Summoning a knight in either physical or spiritual form allowed you to easily swap their form at any given moment. In other words, using a ghost was the perfect way to scout the enemy camp. Lancelot proceeded to thoroughly scout all the enemy positions. He noted their exact numbers, the placement of anti-aircraft guns, and enemy capabilities. Within 2.5 hours, Lancelot gathered all necessary intel and returned. Surprisingly, they discovered that some human soldiers had actually been twisted into ugly goblin creatures. In addition, these beasts kept humans caged up for dark sacrifices. The world was changing fast, turning into a living nightmare by the minute, Lancelot reported. One of those goblin commanders was actually a high-ranking officer, meaning they were preparing to bring in even more enemy reinforcements. This was invaluable intel Lancelot had gathered for them. He saw it all. Still, the average soldier found it hard to comprehend, since nobody wanted to believe the enemy was actively capturing innocent people for some twisted scheme. Sure, the rebels joined up willingly, but their reason for keeping civilian hostages remained a mystery. Suddenly, Lancelot overheard the officers talking about a priest. The skeleton knight realized those captives were actually tools to trigger repulsion. He explained that every dimensional being exists inside a strict power system called the hierarchy. This cosmic authority protects higher-ranking entities from any cheap attacks launched by those far beneath them. The wider the rank gap, the stronger this protective shield becomes. For instance, a basic 9th rank strike cannot even scratch a monster of the 8th rank. Basically, they are slaughtering humans just to climb up this power ladder. Using human sacrifices for rank is a desperate move of low-intellect beasts. It is a cheap shortcut, and when weak monsters pull stunts like this, it usually means they have made a dark pact with high-ranking entities. Lancelot could not pinpoint the exact deal they had struck here. Seriously, who does that? Anyone sacrificing humans like this deserves absolute death. Meanwhile, the Lieutenant General kept analyzing the entire situation, suspecting the enemy had an even more sinister plan. Still, the fresh intel Lancelot brought back was incredibly useful. Their overall chances of winning just shot through the roof, since they finally located both the brigade commander and those pesky anti-aircraft defenses. But the real problem was still looming. The enemy defenses were way thicker than expected, and the moment the battle started, they would immediately call for help. If the first corps deployed, this mission would spiral out of control into a bloody, full-scale war, which they absolutely could not afford. They were too outnumbered and needed to seize the base before reinforcements flooded in. To pull off a lightning strike, they desperately needed air support to clear out the defenders. But those anti-aircraft weapons made any airborne assault suicide. Jaim knew he did not have the luxury to wait for backup, because his older brother's home was right in the danger zone. He had to head there now. Granted, Lancelot was a level 7 knight who could solo the entire army, but the area was just too massive, and enemies would swarm them before he could finish the job. Lancelot's spirit recommended summoning a second knight to handle those anti-aircraft weapons, but that meant using rare enhancement and magic stones. Unfortunately, Jaim did not have a single one left. He could unsummon Lancelot to reclaim the stones and summon him again, but that was pointless since it would not boost his overall power level. Besides, Jaim had no idea how to. He needed to contact a different knight. Lancelot was practically family now. It really would have been amazing to replicate that rare strengthening stone. Sadly, the young man had zero clue how to duplicate magic stones. Lancelot's spirit quickly stepped in to remind him of a solution. By defeating the King of Knights, he could easily get an enhancement stone. Honestly, with all the chaos going on, Jayam had totally forgotten that. After defeating the King of Knights, he actually received a yellow magic stone. The others just stared at Jayam, baffled that he forgot about such a massive treasure. Now they had to choose which knight to summon to aid Lancelot. Lancelot assured him that every single knight possessed unmatched skill and loyalty, meaning they wouldn't be disappointed, no matter who they chose to bring back. Still, he believed one specific knight, named Bediver, was their absolute best option. He was highly skilled at long-distance combat, once celebrated as the greatest archer of all time. Meanwhile, at the rebels' hidden base, even the bright sun didn't feel very welcoming. Since it could only be seen through the cold bars of a prison cage, a captive girl sat there with her legs pulled close to her chest, trying desperately to avoid looking around. Most prisoners around her were dead. Her turn was next. Suddenly, heavy footsteps approached, followed by a quiet whisper aimed directly at her. A mutant rebel soldier stood right outside her cage. He sneered, offering her a dark business deal. To get her out of there, the creep promised her freedom if she did him a little personal favor. But before she could even process this disgusting, twisted offer, everything changed in a flash. The mutant's head popped off, clean cut, just like that. It happened so incredibly fast that the terrified girl couldn't even react or scream. She just sat there, completely numb from the sight. She watched in shock as a monstrous skeleton knight marched past her cage, effortlessly slicing off the heads of nearby goblins while shattering the heavy locks. Holding the prisoners, within seconds, the girl found herself completely free, utterly clueless about who her savior actually was. With the guards wiped out, the gate was wide open, leaving her path clear. But as she looked around, searching for her rescuer, a blazing bowling ball of fire tore past her at insane speed. The goblin warriors stared in complete disbelief at this strange flying projectile, squinting up at the sky to figure out what was heading their way, but they couldn't react in time. Death was rushing down upon them at the speed of that raging fiery bowling ball, right along with those doomed goblins. The weapon completely demolished the heavy anti-aircraft defense stations, tearing them to shreds for reasons that remained entirely a mystery. The heavy guns were totally obliterated every single zone they had been deployed in. Then the skeleton knight grabbed the next blazing projectile with his bare hands, completely unfazed by the heat. After that, he loaded it into a massive slingshot device and fired it with flawless accuracy right at his targets. But wait, Lancelot suddenly remembered a critical detail they all needed to hear before choosing Sir. Summoning Bediver. The catch, the man only had one arm. But even with only one hand, his legendary aim was unmatched. Let's look back. Long ago, Bediver served as a loyal knight. His duke grew terribly jealous of the young man's incredible talent, so he cut off Bediver's arm. Still, the knight adapted, holding a thick leather strap. Without a bow, he used this strap to fling heavy stones and spears. He earned a spot in Camelot, carving out a tragic but legendary legacy. Naturally, Guillaume doubted a one-armed warrior could dismantle anti-aircraft defenses. But Lancelot knew better. He had absolute faith in the knight's skills. He was fully confident that Bediver alone could pull this off. Trusting his ally, Guillaume handed the crucial demolition job to the skeleton. The fate of the entire mission fell on this one-armed knight. Bediver did not disappoint. He launched massive fireballs with his single hand. The blasts tore through the defenses, obliterating the goblin squad completely. Nearby, a goblin commander spotted the massive explosions from his base. He stared out the window, watching his anti-air division go up in smoke. Chaos erupted as panic spread. Something was seriously messing with them. The very air grew distorted and heavy around the enemy camp. Then reality hit. The commander realized his lieutenant was already dead. Standing over the body, a skeleton knight holding a massive blade approached. The beast knew bypassing his defenses like this was flat out impossible. This silent, skull-faced intruder was clearly no ordinary monster he could easily defeat. Meanwhile, Guillaume was staring at his screen, analyzing his options. He tracked his magical stockpiles and tactical limits. The magic stone count rose so fast. Guillaume broke out in a cold sweat. Honestly, watching this, even Yonwoo looked shocked. Fireballs were launching one after another in a relentless barrage. They detonated in unison, leaving no room for anyone to escape. A literal hellscape consumed the battlefield. Then, a massive fire flower bloomed. It was the signal. The sky glowed to confirm the anti-air guns were gone. Bedivere cleared the zone fast. Lancelot's tactics combined with Bedivere's raw talent were unstoppable. Honestly, these skeleton warriors belonged in an elite special forces unit. They were incredible. Guillaume could now march forward without worrying about traps. Meanwhile, Bedivere stood over the ashes, trying to figure out his directions. He was squinting at his orders, trying to find his next target. His objective was utterly pulverized, and the signal flare was already sent. But Lancelot's navigating directions made absolutely no sense to him now. Standing at a quiet crossroads, the skeleton simply had to guess which way to go. He trusted his gut and started walking. Elsewhere, Lancelot was busy. He had the enemy commander cornered, struggling to hold back his power. He needed information before he accidentally crushed the creature. Lancelot demanded to know who trained these beasts and deployed them here. He demanded to know where their main leader was hiding and what they planned next. Specifically, he wanted to know the exact strength of their fearsome First Legion. Shaking, the goblin realized this skeleton knew far too much to be ignored. Spitting out the whole truth that the skeleton knight demanded, their master was Thénardier, a terrifying monster so incredibly powerful that the skeleton knight, an 8th rank warrior, was not even fit to serve him. Lancelot had never heard of this entity. The knight demanded to know Thénardier's plans, but the captive knew absolutely nothing at all, begging the knight not to beat an old, sick goblin. While Lancelot paused to try and recall this mysterious name, the sneaky goblin slowly began crawling backward. The second he saw a chance to escape, the general suddenly leaped to his feet and sprinted straight for the open window. Shattering the glass, he threw himself out into the empty air, landing hard on the cold asphalt. A twisted leg meant he could barely move. His loyal soldiers rushed to their general's side as he screamed for his motorcycle right now, but Lancelot was already diving out of the same shattered window. Landing completely unscathed, the skeleton knight made a cold promise escape was impossible. Instantly, the goblin forces charged forward to shield their leader from Lancelot's blade. They threw themselves into harm's way, pushing the general to safety while staying behind to block the knight. This sudden display of loyalty genuinely surprised Lancelot. Why would they willingly lay down their lives? For the monsters, it was simple. Dying for honor was far better than being an empty-headed blockhead like a skeleton. The goblin raised his rifle, warning Lancelot to drop his smug attitude. Their squad already had several 8th-level elites, and with just a few more human meals, this very soldier would easily equal the skeleton knight's power level. It was how they all grew. Every soldier who transformed did exactly the same thing, devouring humans to rapidly skyrocket their rank. In this brutal post-apocalyptic world, surviving meant adapting by any means. Lancelot did not care. With a swift, effortless swing of his sword, he took the goblin's head off, showing no mercy to these beasts. These monsters deserved death, and killing them was second nature. Meanwhile, the general fled with his last remaining bodyguard, scrambling away from the chaos while Lancelot cut through the horde. The general actually believed his desperate escape had succeeded, but think again. Roaring helicopter appeared directly overhead. Yon Wu was piloting, yelling that he was coming down to land. But a severely motion-sick Guillaume was too dizzy to even comprehend. The fleeing monsters froze in absolute panic at the sight of the chopper. Thinking the government army had arrived, the terrified general panicked. He never got to answer his soldiers' question on what to do. The bodyguard's head was already rolling, sliced clean by Lancelot's blade. Lancelot loomed over the surviving general, making it clear his run was over. Finally, Guillaume managed to shake off his dizziness and joined his skeletal partner, but this goblin leader was not done. Refusing to die, he grabbed a handful of raw magic stones and shoved them down his throat. A monstrous transformation immediately began, and the mutating monster rapidly ballooned into a massive, terrifying 8th-level titan. He grew far stronger, his eyes burning with pure, fiery hatred. To force his level up, the brigadier general cast aside his humanity. His body now resembled a massive gorilla, the price of rushing things. He desperately wanted that quick power-up, choosing the ultimate shortcut to gain strength. Standing his ground, the mutated commander refused to run away. He simply felt zero threat from his pursuers. Even though Lancelot was only level 7, the knight remained completely calm, knowing Bediver would easily crush this monster. Up on the rooftop of the building, the one-armed knight stood ready. He positioned himself perfectly above the chaos, waiting for his moment to strike. Glad he followed his gut instead of the plan. A spinning, flaming ball of pure energy launched straight at the target. The explosive impact instantly tore him to shreds. Soon after, the army lieutenant general arrived and was thrilled by their spectacular victory. The two brave knights had eliminated the threat and secured the civilians. All that remained of the mutated general was a grotesque pile of muscle. Unfortunately, Lancelot could not extract any useful information about the rebel plans except for the existence of a high-level creature calling the shots. It went by the name Tenadia, a name the young knight had never heard before. To help solve this puzzle, Lieutenant General Yu suggested searching for hidden documents inside the Brigadier General's former headquarters. Lancelot pointed out that the critical files were kept on the 4th floor. But the sheer volume of paperwork was staggering. Lieutenant General Yu thanked him warmly for his crucial assistance. He promised his soldiers would handle the tedious sorting process from here. The knights had done enough, but a sudden twist occurred. Jayam paid 120 magic stones to scan them. He assured the general that Pax would handle it. No need for the army to waste time. The young man desperately wanted to search for his missing family right away. Suddenly, Pax sent a notification. Strange files outside the military database were discovered, requiring his attention. The system had uncovered a rare spatial being registration form among the papers. This official document possessed the power to increase a user's rating. Lancelot quickly pointed out which document was a genuine official form. The poorly made copy was a forgery, exposing how the military was deceived. This fake registration was turning soldiers into goblins. The registration demanded a massive amount of magic stones from the user. Normally, players registered their existence, but Earth was a different story. This young world had no established players yet. Almost no regular human on Earth could ever hope to meet these strict requirements. Except for Jayam, who stole an 8th-level creature's account. By claiming that beast's registration, Jayam held a document that should not exist here. A legendary item that opened up a whole new path. Under these conditions, why shouldn't he register right now, if the young man fills out the official form? He will not become a goblin, this registration. Form is adapted to every single dimension, so it was written. Plain language. Chung Jayam carefully reread the document and saw that 1,000 magic stones had to be paid for registration. He signed his name, and the registration of the spatial being was finally complete. Right after this happened, Lancelot began explaining to his lord how to send the document. At that moment, one of the goblins sent to fetch the motorcycle finally returned, apologizing to his commander for the long delay. He found the Brigadier General in awful condition. Practically smeared across the cold asphalt, the one-armed knight Bediver was sitting on the roof, admiring the view when he heard voices coming. From below, he peered down in surprise, spotting a motorcycle on the asphalt and next to it a couple of goblins who, in theory, should no longer be alive. Meanwhile, Pax finished registering the pile of documents. It turned out there were over 40,000 papers related to the military. Jayam left all these papers with Lieutenant General Yu because he was in a major hurry to find his family. They knew the Dabong area was captured by hostile rebels, so Jayam decided to drive the car himself. Trusting the wheel to Yunsu was far too dangerous. The young man planned to take only his skeleton knights along and travel in a simple civilian vehicle. However, a new problem popped up. The entire transport fleet was strictly made of military vehicles. Jayam wondered what to do since he had not acquired civilian transport after everything that happened. In the end, the young man decided to ride an electric bike for now and swap it for a car later. Of course, this journey would take longer, but he had no choice. One day he would definitely own a comfortable ride. Jayam and Lancelot left the building and were stunned to see their second knight. The one-armed man sat on a fancy motorcycle. Jayam tried to ask where Bediver had even found this ride. But as it turned out, sometimes it was much better not to know the truth. The knight admitted that his new iron horse belonged to a red-haired goblin. He found it funny and took the trophy for himself. Honestly, it was The brigade general's personal motorcycle, the orcs guarding the outer perimeter of Dabong City, immediately noticed a strange noise. They saw a motorcycle speeding toward them on the main road. It seemed normal, but the guards had not been warned about any upcoming visitors, so they decided to greet these uninvited guests with heavy gunfire. After all, this was not a place where anyone could just show up, but right at that moment, a fiery bowling ball struck its target, destroying one of the goblins forever. The other guard did not even have time to comprehend where his ally had gone before it was his turn to die. Lancelot, without slowing down at all, severed the monster's head with a light movement of his blade. The perimeter guards were finished, and the two motorcycles rode unhindered into the quiet city blocks. In the silence of this ruined city, the echoing sound of rattling motorcycles carried far, and the nearest goblins immediately reacted. Soon, the riders reached He found the house. The neighborhood looked gloomy, with cracked walls and empty streets. No one was around. Jaim carefully climbed the stairs up to the apartment. He pounded on the door and shouted loudly, calling for his brother. No answer came, leaving him with no choice but to break in. You can feel his tension as cold sweat rolls down. He absolutely dreaded what he might find, but delaying would change nothing. Stepping across the threshold, he was met by a quiet, empty apartment. Dust settled over signs of a rapid departure, but thankfully no bodies. This meant there was hope. The home was not even ransacked. Clearly, the owners had left voluntarily, fleeing to some sort of safer haven. Suddenly, his eyes locked onto a neatly folded envelope on the table. It was a familiar sight, exactly like the childhood notes his brother left. The message explained that city phones were down, prompting Hyan-Su to write. He left the note just in case family members came looking. They had fled to their parents' house because staying put was too dangerous. But he strongly warned them to steer clear of Uojambu entirely. While the city center seemed quiet, soldiers were actively kidnapping people. Nowhere was safe. His brother wrote that troops were patrolling everywhere. They dragged away adults and kids alike, completely ignoring age or gender. Any movement was a massive risk, but he promised they would survive. He begged Jaim to stay safe and not risk his life unnecessarily. Jaim felt immense relief, knowing his brother escaped before the rebels arrived. He quickly passed the note over to Bediver to handle. He asked him to show the message to his sisters inside the subspace, though the exact timing of the letter remained a mystery. Jaim knew the first rebel corps would soon reach his parents' location. He had to move immediately, ordering his knight to prepare for travel. The loyal knight saw that his master was far too emotionally shaken. Lancelot did not want him driving. Together, they rushed outside. But as they cleared the exit, a deadly surprise blocked their path. An armored helicopter hovered directly in front of them, weapons locked on. A goblin pilot sat at the controls, radioing that he had eyes on them. A split second later, a brutal and relentless storm of bullets rained down. The devastating hail of heavy machine gun fire swept across the pavement. Concrete pulverized instantly, leaving absolutely zero chance of survival. Thick black smoke quickly swallowed the road, completely wiping out all visibility. Jaim stood frozen, shocked to find himself miraculously alive. He immediately commanded Pax to store the military Black Hawk away. The goblin pilot stared down, stunned to see him standing. But his jaw dropped when he realized his helicopter was completely gone. Screaming in absolute terror, the goblin plummeted straight down toward the asphalt. He crashed hard while Jaim urged Lancelot to keep moving. They could not afford to waste another single second. On their way here, they had crushed multiple rebels and snagged a gunship. But right now, his mind was locked entirely on his family. His own family, wanting to find them as soon as possible under a gorgeous fiery sunset. Nearby, a group of goblins whispered about how the priest would hand out victims by number. They kept reminding each other that several days had already gone by. The monsters needed to hurry and find fresh targets, but no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't wreck it. Lieutenant Park Han-jun's total victim count had already reached 300. Even so, he could not break the structure because his level was too low. He either needed to beg another goblin for help or find another way. Lieutenant Park ordered his crew to hunt down more humans to make up for the gap, since everyone knew what happened to Sergeant Kyung-juman. He was nothing but a monster now, meaning there was only one option left: Put him down, the massive beast, once human, sprinted off to hunt for fresh prey while a crew of motorcyclists sped toward the area. The lead rider was screaming at the top of his lungs for them to get lost, shouting that this was his house and he was going to handle them all right now, with a skeleton knight riding behind him, gripping a jagged blade as the bikes flew past the green beasts. Talk about a clean sweep, their heads were already rolling on the asphalt. Their headless necks twitched violently for a brief moment, soaking the street in dark red before the riders pulled up to a barricaded hardware store with walls heavily reinforced by thick metal plating. Only a single narrow peephole remained, leaking quiet, terrified whispers from deep inside. A scout was perched inside, keeping watch and reporting the outside chaos. Balanced on a stack of plastic chairs, he muttered that bikes had arrived, and one of the riders was bringing a literal skeleton along for the ride. The whole scene felt surreal, reminding him of his grandfather's funeral years ago. Back then, his grandmother shared a bit of old wisdom, that both miracles and tragedies only happen where people gather together. Over time, those words felt deeply real, even in dark times. There is still a clear path toward finding genuine happiness kept alive by the people we love and protect. That is why raising children with trust and deep affection becomes the ultimate shield. As his kids grew up bickering like normal siblings, their father quietly dreamed of building a massive, cozy home where they could all grow old together, though reality proved far more difficult. The expenses were just too high, keeping that perfect home a dream. Still, his kids grew up strong, and their future looked incredibly bright. Right up until the apocalypse arrived, fortunately, his hardware store job gave him enough tools to beat back the monsters, but soon, survival became a daily struggle to ration water, find scraps, and hide. Ruthless looters crawled the streets, forcing his eldest son to move back in, and now they were all forced to hide away in fear of the chaos. Luckily, his daughter-in-law unlocked alchemy powers, meaning they finally had hope. No more worrying about clean water, but then the local soldiers started mutating into monsters. Instead of keeping the peace, they began snatching up innocent civilians. They dragged everyone from their homes, no matter their age or gender, taking them away. For survival, they chose total isolation. The father cared about only one thing, keeping his children completely safe. That fierce protectiveness triggered a miracle. His unique architect ability finally awakened. Now he could construct absolutely anything. His longtime dream had finally become reality. Combining his new powers with his daughter-in-law's, the family managed to survive. He built an impenetrable, self-sustaining fortress that absolutely no one could breach. Meanwhile, his daughter-in-law kept everyone hydrated. Suddenly, the father spotted trouble. Peering through the peephole, he saw hostile soldiers lurking right outside the house. Worse yet, they brought a massive monster. The enemy was preparing to demolish their sanctuary, but the father had anticipated this. Luckily, he had built a secret escape route. He gave the silent signal, telling his family to gather in the hallway immediately. His stubborn son refused to retreat without him, but the father could not guarantee their safety. Risky or not, it beat waiting to die. The old man promised he would follow them out right after securing the perimeter. He swore he would be the very last to exit. Suddenly, a roaring engine echoed outside. A loud motorcycle neared. There was no time left, and he ordered them to run. The beasts were coming to claim his sanctuary. They were ready to kick them out, but wait, what is happening on the street? The family waited in tense silence, wondering why their father had suddenly stopped talking. Then the old man gasped out the shocking news. Jeongjam was finally back. He was riding a motorcycle, flanked by skeletons. Jeongjam stared at his childhood home, barely recognizing the massive iron fortress before him. It resembled a heavily reinforced steel bunker, completely sealed off from the outside world. He had no idea how. It did not matter. All that mattered was that his family was still alive inside. Suddenly, the entrance swung open. He was greeted by the most heartwarming sight he could have ever hoped for. His stunned family stared back in absolute disbelief. They could not believe their eyes. As the pampered youngest child, Jeongjam burst into tears. He threw himself into his parents' arms, crying freely without a single care. His greatest dream during these dark days had finally come true, but then they looked up. His parents eyed the two creepy skeletons behind Jeongjam with pure terror. Jeongjam quickly introduced his undead knights, reassuring his worried family. Next, he summoned a glowing portal, revealing his two sisters eating dinner inside. Seeing them safe sparked a fresh wave of happy tears from everyone in the room. Once the emotional reunion calmed down, Jeongjam gathered his entire family. He transported everyone into his pocket dimension, guiding them to a massive table. They feasted together, celebrating their long-awaited reunion. However, the mother grew strangely quiet because the banquet food tasted absolutely incredible. Suddenly, her home-cooked meals faced some serious competition. Meanwhile, the grandfather stepped forward to inspect their strange new skeleton guests. Grandfather got to know the knight better, no more fear. Lancelot introduced himself. He shared his name. Immediately, grandfather asked if he could play Changi. Korean chess. Lancelot was highly intrigued by the board game setup. Lancelot joked, folks back home were famous for dismantling monster corpses. His grandfather completely missed the joke. Dark humor is hard. Besides, his hearing was shot anyway. He just told Lancelot to sit. He wanted to teach him the game. Meanwhile, Hyeonsu, Jayam's older brother, held a glowing magic stone in his palm, presenting it directly to Jayam. It turned out to be a fire-amplifying stone, and Hyeonsu explained exactly how he got it. He once watched a rhino beast and a griffin fight in a brutal clash. The griffin one completely devoured its prey and left this glowing stone behind. Hyeonsu handed over the artifact, wanting Jayam to have it. Since his younger brother needed it more, Jayam accepted the useful tool. He reminded Hyeonsu that with his skills, obtaining items was easy. Instead, he advised him to focus on keeping his wife's family comfortable. Both brothers were incredibly happy to reunite after so much time. Their massive age gap meant they barely spoke during early childhood. Hyeonsu thanked his younger brother for the warm welcome and departed. He wanted to share the arrangements, leaving Jayam alone with his thoughts. Jayam noticed the scar on his older brother's face, realizing he survived true hell. But the main thing was survival. Just then, his father interrupted his deep thoughts. He praised Jayam, calling his incredible magical abilities absolutely outstanding. His father said he was sincerely grateful and incredibly proud of him. Thanks to those abilities, the entire family was finally safe and eating well. But his father gently reminded him that both good and bad things happen. Good and bad things only happen around people. Jayam held those words close, knowing he could never do everything alone. Even with godlike abilities, a single person cannot carry the world. He remembered clearing the dangerous wyvern tunnels, constantly questioning his own path. Hyeonsu had warned him that even with awakened power, life remains difficult. And that was the exact moment Jayam finally realized why they help others. Everyone just wants their family safe, and his family needed help too. He hoped someone would protect his family, just as he protected strangers. At the end of the day, with or without powers, we are identical. We all suffer and fear the cold grip of death, yet we live together. Sharing this world means helping one another, otherwise things would be too cruel. Empathy is the core quality that truly makes us human. His father smiled warmly. He realized he raised an amazing man. He felt immense pride. Meanwhile, things are looking incredibly busy back at headquarters. Tired officers were frantically sorting through mountains of highly classified documents. They worked relentlessly, but their eyes were burning. You can practically feel their exhaustion. Just as they reached their absolute limit, the secretary knocked on the door. She quickly informed the lieutenant general of an unusual visitor. A one-armed skeleton knight had arrived, and Batever had a quick message. His master Jayam was already heading to Haju, leaving the general stunned. He knew exactly who was being discussed, but had no idea why the young man went there. The lieutenant general connected the dots, suddenly remembering that the first rebel corps was stationed right there. He went to face them entirely. Completely alone, outside, the setting sun cast a beautiful warm glow on the armor of his knights and their heavy bikes. He was traveling with his trusted companion, the loyal knight Lancelot, now that his primary mission was finally complete. He had successfully secured his family in a safe place. Nearby, Kim Sol was pouring all her rage into training, relentlessly hammering a heavy punching bag with zero regard for her own physical pain. Soon, another heavy bag ripped to shreds. She sent it flying with a final strike into the far corner, where it joined a massive pile of ruined gear. Instantly, she ordered Pax to fetch another sandbag, demanding he hurry up. From the sidelines, her worried father watched his youngest daughter throw this massive tantrum, completely baffled by her intense anger. Her eldest daughter, Ju-young, explained that the girl was deeply upset with her brother for leaving her behind on this dangerous outing, while she was highly skilled. Bullets and armored vehicles were far too risky, so she took out her frustration on these poor sandbags. Her family knew exactly why she did this. Since she always hated staying cooped up while others faced danger, that was just her nature. Later on, Ju-young noticed a brand new, prominent scar running across her brother's face, but he quickly brushed the topic aside. He calmly told her that it was nothing to worry about, and it only hurt when pressed. Using her rare healing powers, his sister mended the wound on his face, then opened up about her time at the hospital. Apparently, the corrupt chief doctor used mind-altering toxins to brainwash and manipulate the entire staff. It was absolute terror, leaving her constantly terrified of getting drugged and losing her own free will. But thankfully, that nightmare was finally over. Soon, lunchtime arrived, and Hyun-soo's wife called everyone to gather in the kitchen. Meanwhile, Hyun-soo was busy keeping his little girl happy, while his father playfully acted like a scary monster, but Grandpa refused to sit down for lunch, totally absorbed in a board game. Even though Lancelot was playing this game for the very first time, he grasped the strategies instantly, leaving Grandpa completely stuck on his next move, praying the knight would ask him for some pointers. But get this, massive armored tanks were roaring down the road, and nobody knew whose side they were on: rebels, government forces, or maybe they were Giams. Suddenly, blinding flashes of light erupted, sending massive waves of fire toward them. Giam watched safely from his pocket dimension, launching highly advanced winged missiles. These were incredibly rare weapons, built for pure destruction, unleashing a sea of fire. Naturally, the heavy armor met a brutal end. On the battlefield, blown to absolute smithereens, the young warrior was thrilled with this test run, though he held back his strongest arsenals to avoid collateral damage to innocent lives. Fortunately, the heroic spirit of Lancelot had already scouted the area, mapping out the precise positions of the first rebel division. Shockingly, the enemy was hiding right alongside peaceful civilians in the very same zones as their primary forces. This meant Lancelot had a crucial task ahead, taking charge of the highly dangerous hostage rescue mission. Jinjiam was tasked with halting the assault of the main rebel forces. Since this was a tank battleground, 0 civilians remained, not a single one. Plus, his Black Hawk chopper packed heavy missiles inside the subspace dungeon. He drew upon the Power Stone, a gift from his older brother. This allowed him to boost his basic mobility to the absolute maximum. Speed and range shot up. He was now a terrifying force. With rockets fully upgraded, Giam was ready to sweep the entire battlefield. He could now vacuum up magic stones in record time, aiming for Tier 4. 10,000 stones, that was the ridiculous price of entry. Right now he only had about 2,000, then things went completely sideways. The magic stones stopped accumulating, even though he clearly heard the system sound. What was going on? A quick check revealed something highly bizarre. His hard-earned stones were being redirected to a subscriber named Tanadia. This entity hailed from the Mexica dimension and was actually priest Kim Bonsu. This was the exact traitor Lancelot had warned him about, leaving Giam speechless. A full quarter of his hard-earned income was going straight to his nemesis. Right then, Lancelot returned with news that the rebel camps were wiped out. Bediver arrived right after, having stayed back to protect the helpless survivors. But Lancelot immediately sensed something was off. Giam looked completely stressed. He feared the boy was injured. Giam quickly shook his head. Physically, he was fine, but mentally, things were getting heavy. Still, he needed real answers about the powerful entity backing these rebels. Giam explained that Tanadia and Priest Kim were actively stealing all his stones. They were funneling his hard-earned magic stones directly into this strange Mexica dimension. Giam had no clue what that meant, but Lancelot knew the truth. It was the Dark God's home world, just like how the world of Lancelot's master was known as Earth. Priest Kim Bonsu was nothing but a traitor, sacrificing innocent humans for power. This wicked priest had been closely tracking Giam's combat data. He even watched Giam reunite with his family, planning his next move beforehand. Suddenly, the rate of incoming magic stones spiked to an insane level. But right before that, massive, earth-shaking explosions tore through the area. The goblin heard no heavy artillery, leaving him clueless about the assault. Where on earth was all this overwhelming firepower coming from? It was incredibly frustrating that not a single soul had come forward to report. Suddenly, a devastating blow knocked the powerful goblin completely off his feet. He crashed hard, sliding all the way across the hall on his back. Jaim barely caught his breath after climbing the steps, wondering who they hit. He looked down at the fallen beast, trying to identify this strange creature. But then a strange dark red mist began swirling over the goblin's body. Right before their eyes, his horrific wounds began to instantly close up. Jaim watched in disbelief. Lancelot recognized this sinister regeneration process. The knight had already spotted this same bloody smoke all over the camp. Now the dark truth of what had happened was finally clicking into place. The massive goblin priest Kim himself stood fully healed once more. He was a complete mountain of muscle, packing razor-sharp teeth and massive claws. Priest Kim stared in genuine shock at the bizarre alliance standing right before him. A skeletal knight standing beside a human, he could tell this knight was completely loyal to his master, this talking goblin creature. Deeply unsettled everyone, but Priest Kim quickly explained that his guards had recklessly swallowed raw magic stones, turning them into beasts. It was a nasty side effect because their mortal bodies had no time to adjust. The priest had warned them himself, but their own greed ruined everything. He realized Jaim was rank 8 because the kid possessed an actual account, so he decided to offer a partnership. He wanted the kid and his skeletal guardian to stop wrecking his base. If they walked away, Priest Kim promised to let them live. After all, they had no way of killing him. He, however, could easily destroy them. He was showing mercy for one simple reason. If they died, the goblin faction would lose out. A fight right now was just pointless, when he was making solid profits from trading all those magic stones. But the loyal knight Lancelot knew this crooked priest was entirely bluffing. Jaim, meanwhile, tried to piece together what this goblin priest was really planning. Why make peace now, he had to figure out. If this monster was actually immortal, if he truly was, it had to be linked to that strange mist. He needed to find its source. Immediately, perhaps those human sacrifices were fueling it. He remembered seeing that haze back in the cells, but still lacked answers. Suddenly, the sky behind Priest Kim bled into a dark crimson as heavy smoke swirled upward. The entire atmosphere shifted into a deep, bloody purple. Now watch, because something completely impossible is about to happen. The thick clouds suddenly tore open, revealing an enormous, burning eye. Staring straight down at the ground like a miniature sun, that celestial eye felt completely overwhelming, and Jaim knew he was facing a truly divine entity. Priest Kim laughed, noting that his young guests clearly did not expect to encounter a godlike existence today. These supreme godlike entities almost never make direct contact with mortals, due to cosmic rules, choosing to speak only through proxies. But soon, Tenadia would descend here in the flesh. Priest Kim was the key to summoning this terrifying, high-tier god. The arrogant goblin hoped they finally realized how hopelessly outmatched they were. Even so, Priest Kim was feeling surprisingly generous. He wanted to offer Jaim a final chance because of his talent. Those skills were simply too precious to waste. He demanded the boy get on his knees right now and begged to become his loyal servant, but he never got to finish that threat. Lancelot was deeply insulted that a mere goblin dared to look down on his master. With a casual flick of his blade, Priest Kim's head went flying, but the severed neck instantly began to knit back together with red and dark ash, lifting the head high into the air once again. His neck clicked back into place, and the massive brute, Priest Kim, stood ready to fight again. He faced his opponent, looking even broader and more insanely powerful than before. Meanwhile, the giant eye of a higher creature kept watching the duel from above. It peered down from the clouds, making the priest look like a total demon. Knight Lancelot hated this monster's arrogance, but he remained focused. He was determined to fight, even though he knew this clash was basically meaningless. Still, for a loyal knight, serving his master was a matter of absolute honor. Priest Kim wasn't backing down either, utterly furious at this skeleton. He refused to wait around for an attack and decided to strike first. His massive, muscular frame hurtled straight toward the knight at terrifying speed. But right then, Lancelot recalled the combat lessons Kim Saul had taught him. He shelved his sword and took a solid, unarmed combat stance. Lancelot threw a devastating punch that landed squarely on the goblin's massive nose. The beast's snout twisted violently to the side, spraying thick blood everywhere. The monster was immortal, making this the perfect training dummy for Lancelot. He could finally practice the brutal moves his master, Kim Sol, had assigned him. Sure, Priest Kim was immortal and couldn't be killed. But get this, that just meant Lancelot could beat him to a pulp without holding back. The knight reattached the goblin's severed head, only to instantly slice it off again. He worked tirelessly, but the beast just kept regenerating without any limit. Jaim watched, realizing they couldn't defeat this thing through pure violence. They had to understand how his power actually worked. There had to be a way to halt that endless healing process. Then Jaim recalled a sick patient from the hospital who recovered incredibly fast. He immediately ordered Lancelot to stop trying to kill the priest. Instead, he commanded the knight to toss the goblin straight into subspace. With a swift motion, Lancelot obeyed and hurled the monster toward the portal. Inside, Juyeon received a notification that the portal had opened. She assumed her brother had finished up his business early this time. But the system warned her of an unauthorized energy signature trying to enter. Although the security block held, what came next made her freeze in absolute terror.